Marvel. Unlimited possession at the beginning. Chapter 1. New York. Now insert a piece of news. The New York Police Department has received the latest notice from the thief, indicating that a new round of criminal theft will be launched. In this regard, Police Chief George said that he will do his best to bring the thief to justice. Phantom Kid, New York City's new criminal in recent months. Moreover, unlike other ordinary criminals who are cautious or in a constant state of panic, the thief has become the darling of the major news media in New York for its bold and gorgeous style of crime, and has become the darling of the New York Police Department. Stain. Although, after most of the crimes are successful, phantom thieves will return the stolen items to the owner, but still cannot hide the fact of its perpetrators. At the gate of the New York Police Department, after being interviewed and reported by the media, Chief George Stacy returned to the police station with a dark face. Have you been sure about the content of the notice, whether it was written by that thief? Phantom Thief Kid's unrestrained and unrestrained style of crime, coupled with the media's frenzied reporting, makes him have a large number of fans on the internet. As a result, the New York Police Department often receives imposter notices from some Phantom Thieves' admirers, which brings a certain degree of influence and obstruction to the police's handling of cases. According to the appraisal and comparison between the appraisal department and the notice letter left by the Phantom Thief before, it can basically be determined that it is the notice letter left by the Phantom Thief Kid. If that's the case, then move me one by one, and decipher the content of this daring thief's notice for me as soon as possible. The notice letter can be regarded as a major feature of Phantom Thief Kid. Before each theft, he will send out a notice letter with the inscription, Phantom Thief Kid, and the Q version avatar to inform him, but the content of the notice is often obscure and extremely difficult. Understanding requires reasoning to arrive at an answer. It often takes a lot of time for the New York Police Department to reason, and occasionally there is an example of the police department only knowing the answer to the notice after the Phantom Thief has completed the theft crime. As a result, it naturally attracted a scolding from the New York media for reporting the incompetence of the New York Police Department. For such a result, Police Chief George, although he is not ashamed of these media, which is chaotic and has no sense of justice, but also gritted his teeth at Kid, the Phantom Thief who made the entire New York police humiliating, and vowed to take this bring the lawless guy to justice and let him repent of his crimes in prison. Sidis, you will be responsible for the arrest this time. But Chief, I still have a homicide in the 3rd District that I need. Hearing the arrangement, a black woman with dreadlocks opened her mouth and seemed to want to say something. Leave the homicide investigation aside for now, Chief George interrupted his subordinates and said decisively, now, your first task is to catch this thief for me. I've had enough of this. It's time to be a clown in front of the media every time. Well, you or Booze, you have the final say. Police Chief George returned to his office angrily with a dark face, while policewoman Sidis had a helpless expression on her face. The investigation of the homicide in the 3rd District, she just had some clues, and it was determined that it may be related to an extraordinary event. Hey Sidis, you are brave enough. How dare you talk to the chief like that? Joked the policeman who was close to her. I'm just stating the facts, Sidis shrugged. Besides, all New York knows that Kid the Thief is not so easy to be caught and brought to justice. As a member of the New York Police Department, Sidis naturally does not want to see criminals like the Thief Kid go unpunished, but she has to admit reluctantly that with the current capabilities of the New York Police Department, it is still difficult to arrest the thief. Be careful, Sidis, you can't let the chief hear what you said. Taking a peek at the police chief's office, the colleague couldn't help but remind him. Of course, Rem, I'm not stupid. New York, the top floors of iconic buildings in Manhattan. A huge figure sat there, looking down at the notice in his hand. The long silence did not bring quietness, but enveloped everyone in the office like a deeper darkness. Have I been dormant in the dark for so long that people have forgotten what the name Kim Bong stands for? After half a sound, a deep voice came from the huge figure. No, your name has always been circulating in the dark, and everyone has surrendered to your shadow. The man in black tights said. Then why, there are guys like the Phantom Thief Kid who sent me a notice. Although in the eyes of the media and the police, the Phantom Thief is a lawless criminal, but as the king of the criminal empire, he controls nearly 40% of the entire New York. The gold of criminal activity, but apparently does not take it seriously. Jin Bian stood up, and his huge body was cast like a huge shadow. The huge body far beyond ordinary people and the clear muscle lines under the white suit made him appear dark and destructive. He released his broad palm, revealing the contents of the notice. Announcement. With thoughts of the dead, on a quiet night, the king dormant in the shadows, I will take away the rod of power. Phantom thief kid. It's just an unimportant little fool. No, Lester. Jin Bian opened his mouth and said in a low voice, even the most insignificant guy, as long as he dares to show his minions to us, he should destroy it and let them know clearly what can and cannot be done. The world needs order, and gold is order. Reaching out and picking up the cane, Jin Yen stepped to the edge of the huge French window behind him and stood there, looking down at everything silently. He enjoys it, as if the whole of New York is in his hands. The premise is that there are no nosy vigilantes. A haze flashed in his eyes. Jin Bian stroked his crutches, and said slowly but wildly in his deep voice. Only death can wash away the offense of the ignorant to the king. James, do you have time this weekend? In the cafe on the corner of Manhattan, a girl with beautiful blonde hair gathered up her courage and invited the Asian man in front of her. Sorry, Jennifer, the girl's golden hair really caught Li Ran's attention, and he naturally wouldn't want to miss the chance to date her if he could. Unfortunately, thinking of the upcoming important events, Li Ran had no choice but to refuse. I have very important work this weekend, so. Really? The girl Jennifer's face showed obvious disappointment. But next week, I'll have some free time after the event is over, if Jennifer you were still. Of course, I have time in these 2 weeks. Hearing this, the girl couldn't help but blurt out, and then she realized that she was a little too reserved, but she continued with a blushing face. Then it's settled, James, we're going out together next week. Certainly. Li Ran nodded, watching the back of the girl leave happily, then lowered his head and drank the rest of the coffee on the table. I have some regrets in my heart. How wonderful it would be if I was in an ordinary world. In this way, he doesn't need to worry about facing various threats, and he doesn't need to worry about a guy who cares about the birth plan of the whole universe, thinking about snapping his fingers. Why did it happen that it came to the world of high-risk superhumans like Maiman, where superheroes are flying all over the sky? That's right, Li Ran is not from this world. When he just traveled to New York 2 years ago, he was still thinking about his dream of writing scripts, making movies, and having fun in Hollywood. Until one day, when he learned that there are Osborne Enterprises, Stark Industries, and a kingdom called Wakanda in Africa, and rumors about the Manhattan Hell's Kitchen vigilantes circulating in the streets. Only then did I know that my Hollywood movie dream was shattered, and the difficulty of traversal jumped from the original ordinary difficulty to the hell difficulty. After coming out of the cafe, Li Ran walked back along Manhattan's 8th Avenue, passing through the crowds, avoiding the gathering places of certain apparently specific gangs, and stopping near West Midtown, commonly known as Hell's Kitchen. A small antique appraisal shop appeared in front of him. James, you still came so early today. Hard work is one of my great virtues, Jack. Li Ran greeted the old Jack at the laundry next door with a smile, opened the door, and flipped the sign hanging on the door to the opening side. In the antique store, there is a dazzling variety of goods, but in fact, most of them are just appearances. A large part of them are wholesale goods that Li Ran went to Chinatown to find. The price is only a few to $10. The most expensive is also it won't be more than 30 knives. In short, even if the entire antique store is patronized and looted by thieves one day, it will not cause too much loss to Li Ran. Of course, nowadays, there shouldn't be any more such an eye-opening guy. Because everyone in the 8th Way knows that James Lee of the antique shop is a dangerous guy, at least not someone they can easily provoke. In the antique shop, Li Ran summoned the system. Like most traversers, Li Ran also has a system, but this system is neither as intelligent as it is said to be, nor does it give him various tasks. Li Nuo's system currently only has 2 functions. The first is to accumulate fame or impression. Simply put, the deeper the impression Li Nuo has on certain people, the higher the reputation he can get. And according to Li Nuo's experience, it seems that the more famous people are in the world of American comics, the more legendary they can get. The second function is actually the role of fame. Li Nuo can open various treasure chests in the system through the accumulated fame. The legendary required to open the chests varies from 100 to a maximum of 1 million. The items in the treasure chest are also different. Wooden treasure chest 100 legend 100 will give E-class cards and some useless props after opening. Dark iron treasure chest 1000 legend 1000 opens and you will get D-level cards, C-level card fragments, and small items. Bronze treasure chest 10,000 legend 10,000 will be open to get C-level cards, B-level card fragments, and items. Silver treasure chest 100,000 legend 100,000 will be open to get B-level cards, A-level card fragments, and random powerful items. Golden treasure chest 1 million legend 1 million will be open to get A-level cards, S-level card fragments, and character-specific items. The props part can be ignored for a while, because so far Liran has not drawn any too powerful props. It is the card, which is the key core capability of the entire system. Liran will gain the abilities of various characters from the cards drawn from the system treasure chest. Leaving aside some purely funny E-level quest cards, the most important thing in Liran's hands at present is a D-level one that takes half a year to accumulate the legend card. D-class card, Kato Kid. Skills: Magic, Cross-dressing, Escape, Appraisal. Background introduction. A legendary and world-renowned strange thief. The International Criminal Code is 1412. He has extraordinary intelligence and is proficient in disguise, voice change, and escape techniques. He targets all kinds of precious artworks such as jewelry, and uses magic techniques to commit crimes. The super thief. That's right, causing the entire New York media to report that the Phantom Thief Kid, who was being pursued by the police, was actually Liran behind the hidden truth. The reason why he took such pains to use the identity of the Phantom Thief was naturally for the sake of fame. Back then, in order to get the 1,000-point reputation that could open the Black Iron treasure chest, Liran had to suffer a lot, especially in Manhattan, known as Hell's Kitchen. He worked diligently for half a year before saving the legendary degree required for the Dark Iron treasure chest. Simply, the result of the final opening did not disappoint Liran. Especially the card of Phantom Thief Kid is simply a weapon for gaining popularity. In just a few months, Li Nuo has accumulated nearly 800 popularity. As long as he does another big deal, the Black Iron treasure chest will beckoning to him. No wonder Li Nuo is so obsessed with opening the treasure chest. The key is that being in the Marvel world is too insecure. Even if you live a quiet life without provoking anything, one day you will be in the center of New York City. Suddenly a group of aliens flew in to send you to see God. After finally crossing into this world, even if this world is not very friendly, Li Nuo doesn't want to see God or other existences so early. Therefore, it is only natural to frequently appear in front of New York citizens, and use the Phantom Thief Kid's vest to try his best to gain popularity. April 1st, April Fool's Day. While the New Yorkers were still immersed in the cheerful atmosphere of mischief, Times Square and the New York City police gathered here early to raise their guard. What happened? Mommy, there are so many police officers. Is it an April Fool's joke? Looking at the appearance of this real gun and live ammunition, it is not as simple as a joke. We'd better get out of here. It would be bad if we waited for something dangerous to happen. Hey man, you guys are so cool. Ignoring the reactions of the surrounding New York citizens, Police Chief George turned to the black female policewoman Sidis and asked, "Are you sure it's here?" He personally led the operation in this operation, and a sniper was also arranged in the distance to stand by for shock and deterrence. The purpose was very clear, that is, to arrest the thief kid and bring him to justice, to wash away the shame of the New York Police Department during this period of time. According to the clues given in the notice, we can basically determine that the location is Times Square. Policewoman Sidis held the notice left by the thief and speculated, the April Fool refers to its April Fool's Day, and the crossroads of the world is clearly Times Square. Using the notice left by the criminal to speculate on where the criminal will commit the crime next, this kind of feeling somewhat makes the director George feel a little embarrassed, but as an experienced old policeman, he still quickly dealt with himself. He continued to ask, "What about the red moonlight, what does it mean?" Sidis shook her head and replied blankly, "I don't know, I've been thinking about the meaning of moonlight, but I haven't had any clues." "Sorry, Booze. No need to feel sorry Sidis, you've done enough." In this regard, the director George did not criticize too much, and being able to determine the time and place of the crime of the Phantom Thief Kid is a very important achievement in itself. As for the rest of the notice, the NYPD will have time to figure it out after the Phantom Thief is caught. However, director, will it be too high profile for us to do this, in case Kato Kid sees so many people? Sidis glanced at the citizens around Times Square and said worriedly, "About this, there is no need to worry. According to our analysis of the Phantom Thief Kid's clothing, criminal process and criminal psychology, we can basically confirm that he is a performative criminal personality, that is to say, the more people come, the more the on-site maintenance will be. The tighter it is, the more it will stimulate his criminal desire. Sidis didn't quite understand the knowledge that the director George said was too professional, but thinking of the past criminal cases of the Phantom Thief, it can be seen that the other party did not take the police seriously. Even in many criminal processes, the police are clearly guarding the scene, and they are still rampant to carry out their criminal thefts. As long as the Phantom Thief dares to appear in Times Square, it will be the end of his criminal career. Using a lot of resources to lay the net, George Stacy seems confident. However, watching the chief's actions, the black female policewoman Sidis became a little uneasy. And this unease became more and more obvious as time went on. "What's the matter, Sidis? You look strange." Colleagues who went out to the police noticed the look on Sidis's face and couldn't help but care. "I'm fine." Shaking her head, Sidis suddenly asked the white colleague with a standard New York police physique beside her, "Rem, have you seen the red moon?" "Red moon?" Rem was stunned for a moment, and then said, "No, I asked people at the Bureau of Investigation before. It is said that this is a rather rare astronomical phenomenon. When a total solar eclipse occurs on the moon. Atmosphere." Quote, Sidis spoke up and interrupted Rem's science. "The purple, blue, green, and yellow light are absorbed, leaving only the red light that can penetrate. And when the atmosphere refracts the red light to the moon on the surface, the red moon forms." Sidis shrugged at the surprised look from Rem. "I also asked the people in the Bureau of Investigation. However, theoretically, the conditions for a red moon are not necessary in the near future unless..." "Unless what?" Rem blurted out. Sidis's eyes swept across the director not far away, as well as more and more pedestrians and media gathered around Times Square. "Unless from the beginning, there will be no red moon." "Rem, what day is today?" Sidis, "April 1st, April Fool's Day." Rem, "Happy April Fool's Day." Sidis. Rem reacted, subconsciously took a breath, and looked at Sidis in shock. "We were all tricked by Kaito Kid." With a bitter smile on her face, Sidis looked at Police Chief George not far away. "The most important thing now is how to tell this fact to the director. It was just a disaster." Rem can hardly imagine the expression on the head of the authorities knowing the truth. Famousness from Sidis +5. Famousness from Rem +1. Fame from George Stacy +10. Looks like the cops in New York have caught my April Fool's prank. In Manhattan, next to a tall building, a black man doing nothing looked at the prompt given by the system and couldn't help muttering to himself. Naturally, the black man was dressed by Lee Ran, and he had the cross-dressing skills from Kaito Kid. A simple disguise like this was a piece of cake for him. The reason for this dress is not that Lee Ran is idle and bored and has nothing to do. If it is said that the notice letter to the New York police is just an April Fool's Day prank in order to reduce the existence and fame of the Phantom Thief Kid, then, the notice letter to Jin Bing is a real notice of the theft that will be carried out. In order to make the whole theft process go smoothly, the preliminary investigation and preparation work is also essential. After all, from the introduction given on the card, it can be seen that Kaito Kid is just an ordinary person through and through. The reason why he can successfully complete so many theft activities is mostly due to his excellent magic and disguise methods. Such a method may be able to go unimpeded when facing ordinary people like the New York police. However, in the face of Kim and, not to mention the exaggerated body shape of the other party that is far beyond ordinary people, Lee Ran also understands that there are not only ordinary people around the other party. Simply, apart from the card of Kaito Kid, Lee Ran is not completely helpless. His eyes swept across the towering building in front of Jin Ning again. Lee Ran retracted his gaze, turned around and walked at a pace that matched his black dress, and swayed and disappeared at the corner of the street. The next day, the entire New York media was covered with news about the New York police in Times Square yesterday who were tricked by the Thief Kid's April Fool's prank. Happy April Fools. NYPD, The New York Times. NYPD, Stupid Day, Daily Bugle. The Times Square Farce, City Daily. Bold Thieves, Stupid Cops. Manhattan District News. Conan. Kate, if I were you, I wouldn't call the police. Kate. Why? Conan. Because they're still in Times Square. Live audience. Haha. The Conan Show. Famousness from New York citizens +0.1. Famousness from New York citizens +0.2. Fame from George Stacy +3. The legend from the New York Police plus 0.3. Fame from George Stacy plus 2. From New York. Legend. In the antique shop, Lee Ran looked at the system prompts that kept flashing in front of him. Even through the system, I can still feel the anger of the New York police. After all, this time they really lost face. Coupled with the media's fueling reports, the New York police became the laughingstock of the entire New York City for a while, and also brought a steady stream of legend to Lee Ran. It would be nice if it could give more fame. Under such circumstances, if there is anything that makes Lee Ran unsatisfied, it is the system itself. The statistical method of the system's reputation is quite unfriendly. Ordinary New York citizens can at most increase his reputation by about 0.1, approximately 0.5. To put it simply, the impression Lee Ran left on the 4 New Yorkers was far less than the legend brought by the New York Police Commissioner George Stacy alone. And the statistical method of the system is equivalent to forcing Lee Ran in disguise to find people like New York Police Commissioner George Stacy who can bring high returns to earn fame. For example, gold and ilk. Having said that, if he could, Lee Ran would not give up the possibility of gaining fame from New York citizens. After all, although the fame obtained from American cartoon characters is high, not everyone is like George, the chief of the New York Police Department. As harmless, most superheroes are supervillains or extremely dangerous, either directly or indirectly. At least, it's not something that Lee Ran can get in touch with now. In addition, although the legend brought by New York citizens is low, it cannot bear its own large base. No, after repeatedly swiping the screen, it also brought Lee Ran more than 100 popularity, plus he already had more than 800 popularity, just need a little more effort, the new treasure chest will be in hand. You can't relax, and you can't treat Kim as a New York citizen or a New York police officer. Lee Ran secretly warned himself in his heart, and only then did he suppress the impetuous thoughts in his heart, and returned his attention to his antique shop. Jingle. As the bell at the door of the antique shop rang. Opening the door, a middle-aged man in shabby clothes walked in. Welcome, do you need anything? The man's clearly Asian appearance made Lee Ran take one more look, but then he turned his eyes away and opened his mouth to welcome him. As the largest immigrant city in the United States, although there are not many Asian people living in New York City, they are definitely not many. The man's eyes swept over everything in the antique store. The various antique goods in the store made him a little cautious. He asked tentatively, "Boss, do you accept antiques here?" "Certainly." Quote. From the embarrassed gesture of the other party, Lee Ran had actually sensed something, so he didn't say much, just nodded in response. It also comes from the identification skills of Kaito Kid. After receiving the answer, the man couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, and then he took out a bag from his arms and carefully handed it to Lee Ran. "This bracelet is a family heirloom handed down by my wife from her ancestors. Boss, can you help me identify it and how much is it worth?" This is a fake jade. With the superb and firm skills of the Phantom Thief, Lee Ran had already identified the jade bracelet in the man's hand at first glance. Just a crude imitation. "Boss, how much is this bracelet worth?" Lee Ran's eyes were withdrawn from the man's hopeful eyes, and he looked down at the rough bracelet in front of him. After a long silence, he said, 50. 50. Obviously, there is a big gap between the price that Lee Ran gave and what the man expected, so he couldn't help but say, "Boss, can it be higher? I really need this money." 50 is already the highest price. In fact, if the man's bracelet is exchanged in other stores, let alone $50, even $5 is too much. 50, 50, 50. In the antique shop, the man muttered and struggled for a long time, and finally nodded his head, 50, just 50. Reaching out his hand, he took the $50 from Lee Ran's hand. The man carefully hid it on his body, and finally walked out of the store with a lost look on his face. Another one, the desperate man from Hell's Kitchen. In the laundry shop, old Jack sighed as he watched the man leave. As a man who was born and raised in Manhattan all his life, old Jack has grown accustomed to seeing down and desperate people like men. Who in Hell's Kitchen is not desperate? As the most chaotic, dangerous and impoverished area in the whole of New York, ordinary people want to live peacefully here, it is an extravagant hope. Even Lee Ran himself took a lot of effort to gain a firm foothold here. After casually chatting with old Jack from the laundry shop, Lee Ran returned to the shop and glanced at the jade bracelet still on the table. He put it away and threw it into the grocery pile next to the antique store. Mom, Dad, it's back. Hell's Kitchen, a damp, cramped ghetto. The little girl with two small pigtails, who looked a little thin, shouted to her mother lying on the bed. How is it? Has the bracelet been sold? Asked the woman with a pale face on the bed. Holding up a smile and rubbing his daughter's head, the man looked at his wife lying on the hospital bed. Sold it, but the money is not as much as I imagined. Cough. How much? Only 50. Quote. In the room, after a long silence, the woman spoke with difficulty. Otherwise, don't treat the disease. How can it be? The man interrupted his wife's next words with a loud voice, and the man couldn't help saying excitedly, I will never give up on you. But, we simply don't have that much money. I'll find a way to solve the money issue. If it really doesn't work, I'll go to Mrs. Gao's place. You're crazy. Madame Gao's all work is. No matter what, it's better than watching you die from illness. Dad, Mom. That night, New York City shrouded in moonlight. In the Golden Palace building in Manhattan, people can be seen everywhere, showing the strict defense. As an underworld emperor who has climbed up step by step from the bottom, Jin is definitely not just as simple as it looks. What hides under the huge size is actually his super high criminal mind. With the help of his huge elite team, Jin Bian had already guessed the exact content of the notice letter left by the Phantom Thief Kid. Knowing that the other party will come to steal the crutches in his hand between 2100 and 2300 on April 4th. For this guy who dared to offend himself, Jin Kiki had no intention of being soft-hearted. He arranged his own guards between the various floors of the building, and as long as the thief dared to appear, he would be beaten into a sieve as soon as possible. Just like that, time passed by minute. The rumored phantom thief did not show up for a long time, and the guards who had been guarding the building began to relax. I think, this strange thief dare not show up tonight. After all, this is Jin Bing. If I were a phantom thief, I wouldn't dare to come here. Hee, a thief, how can he compare to Jin Bing? Building top floor. The emotions of the subordinates did not affect this. Time is up. Watching silently as the time passed the last lap, the man in black tights spoke up. Beside him, a group of guards with live ammunition also gathered. It seems that the monster thief will not come. In the end, the so-called phantom thief turned out to be just a coward with a false name. Putting down his crutches, Jin looked at the notice left by the phantom thief, smiled disdainfully, and then reached out and held it into a ball of waste paper. It seems that I think too highly of him. Standing up, Jin Ning looked at the subordinate in front of him, opened his mouth and was about to say something. At this moment, the closed door was opened from the outside. Immediately afterwards, a figure rushed in a panic. The Phantom Thief Kid has appeared. What? Among the crowd, the man in the black tights reacted the fastest. The next second he heard the appearance of the Phantom Thief, there was a flash of light in his eyes, and he had already stepped forward. Click. However, just at this moment, darkness came without warning. What happened? The power went out at this time. Suddenly plunged into darkness, everyone was inevitably a little flustered. The firearms that were originally powerful in their hands have become dangerous in the dim environment, and they dare not use them easily. Only Jin Bing, even in the dark environment, still did not have the slightest panic expression. According to the emergency power record of the building, it only takes 3 minutes to restore the normal power supply state. Now, everyone turns their guns on each other. If there is any movement at the gate, shoot me. Jin Bing gave his order indifferently, and stretched out his hand to pick up the crutch. His eyes suddenly noticed the huge floor-to-ceiling window behind him, and the movement of his hand suddenly stopped, and his mouth immediately ordered without thinking, "Bullseye, window." Hearing Jin Bing's voice behind him, the man in black tights turned around almost without hesitation. Bang! Immediately afterwards, I saw a figure dressed in a white cape suit and a top hat outside the huge floor-to-ceiling window broke in with a loud cracking sound of glass. Bingo! Almost at the same time as the Phantom Thief Kid appeared, the tight-fitting man named Bullseye suddenly waved his arm, and an ordinary playing card in his hand painted a sharp weapon, which accurately hit the Phantom Thief Kid's figure. Puff! However, in the next second, the dull voice from the Phantom Thief caused Bullseye to frown involuntarily. As Jin Bing said, 3 minutes are up. Bright lights illuminate all corners of the room as backup power is restored. Only then did everyone clearly see the figure of the strange thief who broke into the office. It was just a puppet dressed up as a phantom thief with a smiley face. I was so simple, I was deceived by a puppet. Bullseye's gaze fixed on the poker card on the doll's chest. The throwing ability he was proud of, put it on the doll's body, which was the biggest mockery of him. Jin Bing patted the glass shards on his shoulders expressionlessly, and looked down at the empty cane beside him. Obviously, the phantom thief had fulfilled his promise and took his cane away. It was ridiculous that he was still laughing at the other party for being in vain. After a long silence, Jin Bing swept over the men in front of him and suddenly said, "Before, who was the guy who broke in?" Before, the whole process happened very suddenly, and everyone subconsciously ignored the person who suddenly broke in. Now they only reacted after hearing Jin Bing's reminder. The whole thing was weird everywhere. As soon as the other party broke in, the power was cut off immediately. If it's a coincidence, it's really a coincidence. More importantly, now among the crowd, the figure of the other party has mysteriously disappeared. That person, he is the real phantom thief kid. Bullseye reacted, looking at the people who were still staring at each other in front of him, and said unceremoniously, "What are you doing? The other party is most likely still in the building, so let me chase them all." Following Bullseye's order, everyone began to act. "Let them replace the window for me by tomorrow." Jin Bing's eyes swept over everything in the room, and finally stopped in front of the broken floor-to-ceiling window, turned around and said, "Understood, I'll arrange it right away." As Jin and the last one left from the top floor, there seemed to be nothing else in the room except for the shards of glass all over the floor. However, just a few minutes later, a pair of eyes suddenly appeared on the originally flat wall in the room, and then a figure emerged from the wall. Almost, it will exceed the time limit of the props. Emerging from the wall, Li Ran looked at the cane from Jin Bing in his hand, and the expression on his face was somewhat frightened. The reason why it can be integrated into the wall and not be discovered by Jin Ning and others is also thanks to the props that Li Nuo had drawn from opening the box before. Chameleon tea. After drinking this kind of chameleon tea, as long as you stick your body tightly to a tree or rock, you can not only change the color of your body, but even your body will turn into a tree or a stone. Can last 15 minutes. Li Ran has drawn a lot of props like this. Although chameleon tea is only a useless prop in the system's judgment, in actual reality, the effect is unexpectedly useful. Even Jin Bing and the others didn't talk about it. Li Ran didn't leave immediately after stealing the crutches, but hid in the room in a grand manner. It is a pity that there is only one bottle of chameleon tea, and the effect is a little too short. Otherwise, Li Ran's theft plan could have become more calm and simple. I felt a little regret in my heart, but Li Ran's movements were not slow. Jin Bing and his subordinates who have left may come back to check at any time. When he wants to leave, it will not be as easy as it is now. Before coming to the doll, take off the white cape on it. Although the doll of Kaido Kid is fake, the clothes he wears are genuine. In addition to improving the appearance, the large cape on his body is also an important escape prop, which can be turned into a simple glider for his escape. In 3 or 2 times, transform the cloak in his hand into a glider. Li Ran turned his head and glanced at the room behind him one last time, then grabbed the crutches in his hand and jumped down from the broken glass window. Bang! The howling wind blew the wings into an exaggerated arc. Simply put, although the glider modified from the cape is simple, the material is unexpectedly strong. Controlling the glider skillfully folds a gorgeous arc in midair. After 10 seconds, Li Ran successfully found an unmanned alley full of graffiti and landed. Putting away the glider behind him, Li Ran glanced at the cane in his hand again. Although it seems to be ordinary, as Jin Bing's personal belongings, how can this crutch be just a simple ordinary item? He groped for a while at the top of the crutches, and soon Li Ran touched a slightly raised button on it. He pressed it lightly, and then he only felt a slight vibration in his hand, and then he saw the wall of the alley opposite. There was a lacquered black hole that kept emitting white smoke. Luckily, I didn't plan to go head-to-head with Kim from the very beginning. Li Ran stuck his head out and looked at the hole in the wall, with a somewhat fortunate expression on his face. Fortunately, he clearly knew the gap between himself and Jin Bing, and he didn't send it to the door stupidly. Otherwise, the hole in front of him might not appear on the wall, but on his own body. Li Ran doesn't think that his current body is as strong as a wall, and it can be hard against laser light. He sighed at Jin Bing's ferocity and his own wisdom. Li Ran looked at the crutches in his hand, but threw it casually and threw it directly into the garbage in the alley. The crutches with the ability to emit lasers certainly made his heart move, but Li Ran did not forget that the crutches came from the hands of Jin Bing. God knows what else is there other than lasers. Necessary danger, it is better to give up the safety directly. What's more, with the system he has, Li Ran believes that he will definitely get something that is countless times better than the crutch in front of him. Throwing away the crutches, Li Ran didn't stay any longer, and immediately turned around and left the alley. It was only a few minutes after Li Ran left the alley. Bullseye wearing a black tights appeared in the alley. He reached out and picked up the crutches from the garbage pile. He glanced across the empty alley, and soon saw the obvious sign on the wall. Laser traces, took out his mobile phone and dialed a number. The other party was very cautious and directly abandoned the crutches. If that's the case, then come back with my crutches. On the other end of the phone, Jin Bing's deep voice sounded. From today onwards, tell all the forces in Manhattan, no matter who they are, as long as they can catch the Phantom Thief Kid, you will receive goodwill from Jinbian. As the well-deserved king in the dark world, Jin Bing's power is not only from himself, but also from the huge and dangerous criminal kingdom he built with his many years of hard work behind him. Anyone who dares to go against Kim, all need to face a steady stream of counterattacks from the kingdom. For example, the rival gang in Manhattan, and the vigilante daredevil who never tires of looking for trouble for himself. Now, Jin Bing has added a new name to the list of opponents. Phantom Thief Kid. Famousness from Jin and the Guards plus 0.3. Famousness from Jin and the Guards plus 0.4. Legend from Bullseye plus 25. Famousness from Jin and the Guards plus 0.1. Famousness from Jinbian plus 50. At this moment, Li Ran, who was walking in Hell's Kitchen, couldn't hide his excitement when he saw the system data that kept flashing in front of him. Especially the last piece of fame from Jin Bing with a full 50 points made Li Ran sigh that his thoughts were not in vain. Jin Ping is indeed worthy of the famous villain in the world of beautiful comics, and the popularity he gives is powerful. Even if it wasn't for the danger of Jin Bing itself, Li Ran had plans to brush him again and again. Can't be too inflated. Shaking his head and putting aside the messy thoughts in his mind, Li Ran glanced at the Legenda T in the more than 1000 odd level on the system data panel, and suddenly couldn't hold back the urge to open the treasure chest. Fortunately, Li Ran also knew that his current location was Hell's Kitchen, which was not a suitable place to open a treasure chest. Not to mention anything else, but as it is the most chaotic place in New York City, Li Ran was worried that opening the box here would affect his luck. Although, theoretically speaking, a D-rank character card can be drawn from the dark iron treasure chest that costs 1,000 legends. But just like Li Ran's experience of opening the wooden treasure chest many times, even the same D-rank character card has strengths and weaknesses. For example, the E-rank card Nohara Hiroshi currently in Li Ran's hand has no other effect except foot odor. However, another E-level card Anxi Guangyi brought Li Ran the ability of basketball skills, although it still had no effect. Suppressing his innermost thoughts, Li Ran quickened his pace and was about to leave Hell's Kitchen. On the opposite side, an oncoming figure made him slow down his pace. Isn't this the man who had been to the antique store before? Looking at the familiar back that hurried past, Li Ran frowned slightly. Although it was only a brief brush, he still recognized the middle-aged man he had seen in the antique store just a few days ago. However, at this point in time, the other party appeared on the streets of Hell's Kitchen, and his face was full of despair. No matter how you look at it, it's a bit weird. To manage or not to care. Standing still, Li Ran's eyes kept changing from the data panel of the system in front of him to the back of the middle-aged man. In the end, the previous conversation between him and old Jack's desperate man. It flashed in Li Ran's mind. Let him make a decision. Immediately, he chose a direction and walked away. The worried middle-aged man obviously did not notice the shadow that quietly appeared behind him. Traversing the dirty and dangerous lanes of Hell's Kitchen, the man finds himself outside a hidden factory. The man looked up at the factory. His wife lying on the hospital bed at home flashed in his mind, and then he gritted his teeth and walked in. You came. The guard at the entrance of the factory noticed the figure of the middle-aged man, and immediately stepped forward and said, The man nodded, but his eyes subconsciously swept over the pistol hanging on the shoulder of the guard. It was obvious that this factory was not as simple as it appeared. Then hurry up, Mrs. Gao is already waiting for you there. The guard noticed the man's gaze, but he didn't pay much attention, but urged him. Here is, hidden in the shadow of the corner, Li Ran silently watched the factory appearing in front of him and the two people talking at the entrance. The guns on the guards reminded Li Ran that the situation was more dangerous than he thought. Although the use of firearms in the United States is common, the need for a guard in an ordinary factory to use firearms during patrols is itself a doubt. Or, this is not an ordinary factory in the first place. It was determined that the factory in front of him was unusual, but Li Ran had no plans to stay or break into it. After all, judging from the way the middle-aged man was talking to the guard, it was obvious that the other party already knew the situation of the factory, but he still insisted on going inside. Since the parties have already made a decision, why should he meddle in any more nosy things? Although he is in the beautiful world, Li Ran has never thought of turning into a superhero to save the world. On the contrary, his goal is to live as he wants. Although, it is still difficult for him to realize this idea in the high-risk world of American comics. But at least, Li Ran has the opportunity to help him realize this idea. Turn around and walk back along the path you came from. However, just as Li Ran was about to leave, a burst of hurried footsteps came over. Immediately afterwards, a crimson figure jumped over his head. Daredevil. Although the figure was moving extremely fast, Li Ran still recognized the identity of the other party. It is the superhero who has gained fame in Hell's Kitchen recently, Daredevil. Of course, in fact, Li Ran knows more, such as Daredevil's other identity in the daytime, a genius blind lawyer named Matt Murdock. Daredevil's sudden appearance was somewhat beyond Li Ran's expectations. Stopping the steps he planned to leave, Li Ran looked back at the factory behind him. The expression is a little confused. Leaving now, of course, can minimize the danger, but it will definitely miss an opportunity to meet Daredevil to earn fame. Although there are many superheroes in New York City, there are not many who are really suitable for Li Ran to meet at this level. And Daredevil is obviously a relatively safe existence among the many superheroes he can get in touch with. After all, Daredevil is mostly against gangsters in Hell's Kitchen, and the highest is only at the level of Jinbing. It is far from the late stage of the Maiman world, where aliens invade and destroy the Earth at every turn. So, after hesitating for a while, Li Ran made a quick decision. Of course, although a decision has been made, Li Ran will not just go straight into the factory so stupidly. Before going in, he decided to open a treasure chest first, to be shocked. Mrs. Gao, someone has come. In the factory, the man walked up to the second floor under the guidance of the security guards and met the legendary Mrs. Gao. Although Mrs. Gao leaned on crutches with a kind expression on her face, she looked like an ordinary old lady who could be seen everywhere in the man's hometown. But after seeing the situation of the workers on the first floor, the man did not feel relaxed at all. Come on, hard work. Waving away the guard who came up with the man, Mrs. Gao looked at the man in front of her with a smile on her face. He said in a kind tone, "Since you have decided to come to work here, you should have already thought about it clearly. My work here is not as simple as the outside world. If you want to join, you can join and quit, and then quit." Thinking of what he saw on the first floor of the factory, the man nodded with a heavy expression. "Mrs. Gao, my wife is ill, and I need money very much." I know. Mrs. Gao nodded, but said cruel words with a kind expression. "Many of the workers who come to me are in this situation. I will never be stingy in this regard, as long as you can treat yourself like them. Blind eyes, and then help me work in the factory. I will definitely give the money for your wife's treatment." Mrs. Gao's words made the man silent. Even though he always thought that he had made up his mind, but this moment really came, he couldn't help but shake. After all, these are your own eyes. If you can, who can hope to become a blind man who can't see anything? Looking at the struggling man, Mrs. Gao didn't say anything to urge. She just looked at each other quietly, her kind expression always on her face. "Mrs. Gao, will you really give me money to help my wife heal?" "Absolute. I promised, I will work in the factory." In the end, the man made his own decision. Well. Seeing this, Mrs. Gao nodded her head with a smile, walked slowly to the drawer in the room, took out a small black bottle, stretched out her hand and handed it to the man. "Drink the poison in the bottle, your eyesight will be improved for 3 days. The inside becomes more and more blurry, and eventually, like the workers below, go completely blind." On the opposite side, the man stretched out his hands tremblingly, took the bottle handed over by Mrs. Gao and held it tightly in the palm of his hand. He bit his lower lip heavily, raised his hand to open the bottle and was about to drink it. Wait a moment. Mrs. Gao suddenly turned her head to the side and reached out to stop the man's movements. Wait for the poison in the bottle. It looks like an unwelcome guest has come to the factory. Saying that, Mrs. Gao turned around and walked out with a cane. The courage that was finally brought up disappeared because of Mrs. Gao's sudden interruption. The man looked down at the poison in his hand, not knowing whether to be happy or worried. It's just that the happiness or worry didn't last long, and it was quickly broken by Mrs. Gao's shrill voice outside. The blind ghost has come to the door, and everyone will catch him for me. Mrs. Gao's words, in a different world, would be discriminatory against the disabled. However, this is the world of Maiman, and Madame Gao and Daredevil are obviously opposites, so no one takes these discriminatory words in their eyes. No, it should be in their ears. In the factory, following Mrs. Gao's order, blind workers with numb expressions put down the drugs in their hands one after another, and groped for Daredevil, who broke into the factory. Daredevil, as a superhero, has a natural disadvantage, that is, he cannot attack the innocents who surround him. After all, not everyone is capable of running rampant like the Punisher. Especially with his super senses, he has already noticed that Mrs. Gao's factory is blind like him. Instigating the blind workers under her command to surround Daredevil, Mrs. Gao did not stop there, but hurriedly evacuated out under the escort of the guards who came later. She is very clear that the workers in the factory are just ordinary people, and it is even more difficult than ordinary people to act because of invisible relationships. Obviously, it is impossible to trap Daredevil for too long. And since Daredevil can find his secret factory, it also means that the existence of the factory is no longer secret and safe. Bang, bang. However, just as Mrs. Gao and her party were about to evacuate from the factory the next second, with a loud noise, Mrs. Gao saw that the security guards who had been protecting her and the safety of the factory walking in front of her, flew backwards and flew past her at a fast speed, slammed into the wall, leaving a trail behind. Down deep and shallow cracks like a spider's web. Who is it? The miserable appearance of her subordinates and the cracks in the walls reminded Madame Gao of some not-so-good memories. She narrowed her eyes, put away the hypocritical kindness on her face, and looked solemnly at the vague figure that appeared in the shadows. I'm just a justice helper who sees injustice. However, what emerged from the shadows was a man completely unknown to Mrs. Gao. He has a hairstyle that is neither long nor short, wearing a red undershirt, a pair of light blue trousers with rolled-up trousers, and a pair of worn-out sneakers under his feet. Seeing that in the shoe, the thumb is moving. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, who would have associated this shabby homeless man with the danger of knocking down security guards? However, Mrs. Gao is someone who has seen the wind and waves after all, and she is very clear about the meaning of the saying that people can't look good. Therefore, instead of letting her guard down because of the shabby appearance of the homeless person, she took 2 steps back more cautiously, and at the same time waved at the remaining guards and gave the order to attack. Go. Immediately afterwards, Mrs. Gao knew how the man had knocked his guard into the air before. I saw that the other party was short, and he exerted a little force on his feet. In the next second, he came to the guard who fired the shot. He raised his heavy foot and kicked the submachine gun in the guard's hand into pieces, and then lifted it sideways. The leg kicked the guard straight into the air like a soccer ball. Then, with a dull loud noise and the sound of several broken bones, it fell back to the ground ruthlessly. Looking at the guard who fell back to the ground, his whole body twisted into an anti-human appearance. Although the man still looked calm on the surface, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch slightly. The effect of this Vajra leg is a bit fierce. That's right, this man who was born out of nowhere is none other than Li Ran, who has been transformed through the ability of Kaido Kid. And the reason why this scene happened is also thanks to the treasure box he opened outside the factory before. D-Class Card, 5th Senior Brother Axing. Skills: Recycling Garbage, Shaolin Powerful King Kong Legs. Background Introduction. The 5 brothers of the Shaolin team. Extremely addicted to martial arts, has Shaolin Powerful King Kong Legs. Wholeheartedly want to promote Shaolin martial arts and carry it forward. It is precisely because of this card that Li Ran has the confidence to break into the factory. Relying on the mighty power of Vajra legs, Li Ran eliminated the remaining guards in 3s and 5s. Soon, only Mrs. Gao was left in front of her eyes. However, under such circumstances, Li Ran did not relax much. Although Mrs. Gao was leaning on crutches in front of her, and her trembling appearance seemed to lie on the ground without having to do it herself. However, Li Ran clearly knew that all this was just a disguise for the other party. In fact, the other party was alive and well, and one palm could directly knock people several meters away. Who are you? Mrs. Gao's eyes were fixed on Li Ran, who was suddenly in front of her. Did Kunlun send you here? Kunlun. Li Ran is clear that the Kunlun in Gaofu's mouth and the Kunlun he knows are actually two completely different places. The former represents the extraordinary power of China represented by Iron Fist in the Maiman world, while the latter is the ancestor of Wanshan in Li Ran's mind, the place where all immortals gather. I don't know what Kunlun is. Although he understood in his heart, in order to continue the performance, Li Ran could only shake his head while pretending to be confused. I'm from Penglai. Penglai. Famousness from Mrs. Gao +15. Mrs. Gao naturally knew about Penglai, the legendary fairy island in the Middle East. Isn't this a legendary place? Madame Gao still couldn't believe it when she heard the legendary name. It's not the same with Kunlun in your mouth. Li Ran couldn't help but ask. The Penglai in Li Ran's mouth can't really exist, at least in the world of American comics. The reason why he pulls out the name knowingly is to build up the impression of a mysterious force, so as to gain more fame. Quote. Mrs. Gao was silent for a while because of Li Ran's rhetorical question. After digesting the content, she said, since you are from Penglai, why did you come to New York? I'm here to find the legendary ultimate murderer, the evil god of fire clouds. 3 years ago, he disappeared after killing our Penglai people. Recently, there are rumors that someone is in a place called Willard in New York. I saw him. The ultimate murderer, fire cloud evil god. Famousness from Mrs. Gao +20. As an old man who has lived for countless centuries, Mrs. Gao thought she already knew enough, but she didn't want the answer given by Li Ran to still shock her. The legend from Daredevil +15. Li Ran was not surprised that he was able to get Madame Gao's reputation. After all, he said these words for this purpose. However, the prompt of Daredevil appears a bit interesting. This means that the superhero is secretly hiding in a corner, eavesdropping on the conversation between himself and Mrs. Gao. As the saying goes, if one person cheats, two people cheat. Since Daredevil ran to the door to send the legend to himself, Li Ran naturally accepted it. Keeping Li Ran's words in her heart, Madame Gao reluctantly suppressed the surprised look on her face, and then turned to question, since you said that you were from Penglai, and I should have never had any grudges, why did you come here to trouble me? If I say, everything is just a coincidence, do you believe it? What do you think? Mrs. Gao said with a cold face, looking at the guards who were lying beside her. In this world, no one believes the truth. Looking at Madame Gao's expression, Li Ran knew that the other party didn't believe her words at all, even if what he said was actually the truth. He shook his head silently in his heart, and then he raised his head and continued to act according to the character he played. Although Penglai is hidden from the world, it does not mean that there is no right or wrong. What's more, the practice of blinding others for personal gain is even more difficult. It's against the conscience, and it's almost magical. I naturally won't allow you to continue doing this. Is it another existence similar to Kunlun? Sure enough, whether it is Kunlun or Penglai, it is equally annoying. In the face of Li Ran's unequivocal answer, Madame Gao lowered her head slightly, and said in a low voice, like recollection and resentment. Seeing this scene, Li Ran subconsciously tightened his nerves, with an expression on his face as if he was facing a great enemy. As a character who can live for hundreds of years, he doesn't think that Mrs. Gao will have no means of pressing the bottom of the box. The more this time, the more you have to calm down. Here, Li Ran and Madame Gao confronted each other vaguely. On the other hand, Daredevil, who had been hiding in the shadows, couldn't bear it any longer. His rush to Mrs. Gao's factory this time was not for the whole purpose. In addition to fighting the deep-rooted evil forces in Hell's Kitchen, it was also to find out Mrs. Gao and Mrs. Gao. The relationship between Kim and the search for evidence. Tell me, what is between you and Jin Bing? Leaping from a height, Daredevil walked straight to Madame Gao. Be careful, Li Ran only had time to remind him aloud. Then, she saw Mrs. Gao, who was opposite her, turning around quickly with a movement completely different from her old appearance, and slammed Daredevil directly in the direction of Li Ran, and then quickly fled away. The old lady's legs are quick and easy, and she doesn't look like someone who has lived for hundreds of years. Li Ran stretched out his hand to catch Daredevil, and bent his legs slightly to offset the force of the impact. Looking at Daredevil with a painful expression on his face, he said half-truth. You're too impulsive, even I'm not sure to keep her. Who are you? My name is Xing, from Penglai. What's the relationship between you and Mrs. Gao? Why does she have the power to knock people flying with one palm? Daredevil gritted his teeth and asked Li Ran with a painful expression. I don't know, but I can feel that she is not simple, and then you proved it for me. Daredevil, it's too late, I still need to. Feeling the bloody taste in his mouth, Daredevil spat out a mouthful of blood and tried to stand up from Li Ran's support, but immediately stumbled to the ground, clutching his chest with a painful expression on his face. Seeing this, Li Ran directly stretched out his hand and tore off Daredevil's chest uniform, saw the clear palm print left by Madame Gao on his body, and said, "You are seriously injured and need immediate treatment." "No, there are more important things waiting for me to complete." Daredevil was suffering from the constant pain in his chest, but he still struggled to get up. "You will only aggravate your injury." Looking at Daredevil, who was constantly struggling to get up, Li Ran couldn't help but say, "What's the matter? Can't do it again tomorrow." Quote, "Help me, Ah Xing." The repeated struggles seemed to have consumed the last bit of Daredevil's strength. He fell to the ground and turned his head to Li Ran's and put it down. "If Penglai really is a place of justice as you said, then you will definitely help me. Since you said so, then of course I will take action." Li Ran implemented his role and nodded in response without hesitation. Hearing Li Ran's affirmative answer, Daredevil fell to the ground as if he had unloaded a heavy burden. "Help me, save all the people in the factory, you know, they are all innocents persecuted by Madame Gao, them." At this moment, no matter what Li Ran thought about superheroes, Daredevil's actions made him a little moved. "No problem, wrap it on me. Disperse the workers in the factory." Li Ran returned to Daredevil and helped the superhero who was beginning to lose consciousness. "Wait a minute, Ah Xing, please help me with one last thing." Vaguely aware of Li Ran's figure, Daredevil said almost exhaustedly. "Dude, you are already hurt like this, don't talk anymore, can't you take a rest?" Li Ran looked helplessly at Daredevil. "Are all superheroes so tough? This is my last request. Okay, say it, but don't make any excessive demands." Li Ran said sympathetically as he looked at Daredevil, as if he was about to die in the next second. "Help me, burn the factory down." Leaving such a sentence, Daredevil just tilted his head and fainted. Li Ran turned to look at Daredevil, who was seriously injured on his body, then looked back at Madame Gao's factory in front of him, and sighed silently. In the end, he became Daredevil's babysitter. Thinking, Li Ran put a submachine gun into his hand with a little effort under his feet. In return, he shot an oil drum placed in the factory. As the spark continued to spread, the fire quickly spread throughout the entire factory. Billowing smoke and firelight illuminated the surroundings of the factory as if it were daylight. The fierce fire quickly approached where Li Ran was standing, and when he heard the faint sound of a fire alarm coming from a distance, Li Ran immediately stopped and ran out with the unconscious Daredevil. Bang bang bang, who is it? The hurried knock on the door made Claire subconsciously alert. She came to the door cautiously, but did not open the door rashly, but frowned and glanced out with cat eyes. The empty scene at the door made Claire's originally frowning frown even tighter. Going back to the kitchen, he picked up the pan and held it in his hand. Feeling the heavy weight in his hand made Claire feel a little more at ease. Before coming, he carefully turned the handle to open the door. Immediately afterwards, Claire saw Daredevil lying unconscious at the door. "Matt." Daredevil came out of his coma a few hours later. "Don't move, you are seriously injured." In the living room, Claire, who had been staying drowsy all the time, heard the movement from the sofa, and ran over to stop Daredevil, who wanted to get up. "I don't have many professional medical tools here, so I can only temporarily. I will treat you with a simple wound, so if you don't want your injury to be serious, just lie down on the sofa and recuperate, and don't expect me to help you in the future." Claire's words obviously had an effect. Daredevil didn't continue to struggle. He lay on the sofa clutching his chest and panting slowly to ease the pain on his body. "So, Matt, who is it this time?" Claire poured a cup of coffee to resist drowsiness, looked at Daredevil on the sofa, and asked in a familiar tone. Obviously, she is very familiar with Daredevil, and even knows the identity behind his superhero. "Mrs. Gao, an old lady." "Old lady." Claire raised her eyebrows and looked up and down Daredevil at the moment. This injury does not seem to be caused by the old lady. Although it's a little unbelievable, the truth is like this. Even Daredevil himself, if he hadn't experienced it himself, he couldn't believe that such a powerful force would erupt in Mrs. Gao's thin body. All right, Claire shrugged. After all, there was a superhero lying on her couch in front of her, so the fact that there was a strong old lady didn't seem too unacceptable. Then how did you come to my door? As a professional nurse, who also dealt with Daredevil's wound, Claire knew very well that it was impossible for him to come here alone with the other's injury. Axing. Daredevil whispered a name. Axing. Claire repeated the name given by Daredevil with a puzzled expression. Who is Ah Xing, your superhero companion? No, I met Mrs. Gao's factory, and according to him, he's from Peng Lai. Peng Lai. Where is Peng Lai? Claire read this somewhat convoluted name and felt that her brain was not enough. I don't know. Daredevil shook his head, but I have a hunch that I will meet him again in the future. It is said that you have encountered a little trouble, Mrs. Gao. Familiar building, top floor. Jin Bing looked at the thin old man in front of him and said calmly. Are you the same, Kim Bing? Leaning on crutches, Mrs. Gao glanced at Jin and replied to the empty window behind her. It seems that we all had a bad time tonight. Jin Bian reached out and touched his lost and found crutch, and said with a sneer. With two prominent figures in Hell's Kitchen getting together, it's naturally impossible to just chat about common complaints. Shrinking the seldom smile on his face, Jin Ning looked at Mrs. Gao, who was indifferent in front of him, but did not mean to despise him at all. Then Mrs. Gao, do you need me to help you next? With Jin Bing's ability, as long as he gives an order, he can completely help Madame Gao rebuild her drug factory. However, in the face of Jin Ping's good intentions, Mrs. Gao shook her head and refused. No, I'm never interested in the factory or the things in the factory, everything is just for convenience. I'm leaving, Kim, and I need time to think about the way forward. Go, where are you going, Washa? For the first time, the expression on Jin Bing's face changed. Blurted out asked. No, farther than this. Leaning on crutches, Mrs. Gao staggered a few steps, seemed to remember something, and turned to Jin Ning behind her and said, however, before that, I have another interesting news to share with you. Quote. Daddy, you're finally back. After struggling to escape from the factory fire, the middle-aged man returned home and the first thing he heard was his daughter's innocent and romantic voice. Yeah, Dad is back. Holding his daughter tightly in his arms, the man responded with red eyes. Carrying his daughter to the bedside, the man immediately met his wife's worried gaze. You have not. On the hospital bed, the wife's eyes were fixed on the man's eyes, and she spoke with a trembling voice. In this regard, the man didn't say anything more, and didn't say anything about what he encountered tonight, just shook his head. It's fine if you don't have it, it's fine if you don't. After receiving the prepared answer from her husband, the wife on the hospital bed suddenly slumped, leaning on the mouth of the bed and muttering constantly. I can't imagine how I would face my future life if my husband was so blind for him. Dad, there's someone at the window. At this moment, the daughter in her arms suddenly pointed in the direction of the window and shouted. Hearing this, the man's first thought was that Mrs. Gao had sent someone over, and he immediately guarded his daughter and wife behind him with a look of panic. Please spare my daughter and wife, they are all innocent, I will go back to the factory. Quote. The man begged for a while, but the expected situation did not appear. There were no murderous guards under Mrs. Gao barged in, nor did anything terrible happen. Turning to look at the daughter behind her, the daughter nodded her head with a serious expression on her face. Really, Dad, I saw a man appear out of the window. After hesitating for a while, the man carefully forgot the direction of the window. This is the legend from Daredevil plus 25. Fame from Claire plus 15. Famousness from Mrs. Gao plus 20. Famousness from Jinbian plus 30. Famousness from New York Citizens plus 0.5. Famousness from New York Citizens plus 0.5. Famousness from New York Citizens plus 0.3. With the extraordinary leg strength brought by the skill Vajra legs, Li Ran jumped between the roofs of various floors in Hell's Kitchen. Glancing over the content displayed on the data panel, the corners of the mouth could not help but raise a clear arc. Daredevil and Kim and the amount of lore they bring is certainly exciting. However, the three insignificant increases in the popularity of the system at the end were the key to Li Ran's knowing smile. Although, I don't have the idea of becoming a superhero, but it feels good to do something good every now and then. With such a thought flashing through his mind, Li Ran exerted a slight force under his feet and leapt up to a high building. With a few ups and downs, he finally disappeared into the shadow of Hell's Kitchen. Although, sometimes it's good to do good things. However, seeing the middle-aged man in the antique shop again, Li Ran's mood was somewhat subtle at the moment. Not to mention, boss, this gem. Inside the store, the middle-aged man looked restrained. He glanced at the layout of the store and paused subconsciously when he saw the familiar jade bracelet piled on the groceries behind Li Ran. The finished product of the sapphire is good, and it can be considered translucent in terms of cutting. The color is between the 3rd and 4th grades, and it is a bit bluish. Although it is a little smaller, it is still a good boutique gem. Li Ran looked at the familiar gemstone in his hand, was a little speechless in his heart. He didn't expect that after going around in such a circle, the gem he sent out returned to his hand. In terms of price, the price of gemstones has dropped a bit recently, but it is basically stable. And this sapphire is close to 3 carats, which should be between 10,000 and 15,000 in terms of price. Of course, this is only my preliminary estimate. If you want a more accurate price, you need to use the instrument to analyze it again. Although he knew all about the gems in his hand, Li Ran pretended to look left and right before speaking to the man in front of him with a professional attitude. A lot, how much? Although he had already understood the preciousness of the gemstone, he had learned its actual value from Li Ran's mouth, and the man was still a little strict to conceal his inner excitement. Famousness from New York citizens plus 0.5. Bowing his head to scan the content on the data panel, Li Ran continued to reply calmly, it floats between 10,000 and 15,000. 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, so many. Standing in the antique store, he muttered for a long time with his expression like crying and laughing. Only then did the man suppress his complicated emotions, and a bright light flashed in his eyes. Boss, if I can, I want to exchange this sapphire for cash. Saying that, the man's eyes subconsciously swept over the bracelets on the pile of groceries, and... Well, is it different? In the laundromat, old Jack looked at the familiar figure walking out of the antique shop, but his face showed some doubts. Why is it different? Li Ran walked out of the antique shop, and listened to old Jack's self-talk, and couldn't help asking. The appearance of that man seems to have changed a bit from before, as if he has found hope again. Old Jack tilted his head and said uncertainly, "Isn't that a good thing?" Indeed, old Jack nodded, but noticed that Li Ran was about to close the store. Why did the store close so early today? Because there is an important appointment waiting for me to attend. Li Ran smiled slightly, and flipped the sign at the door of the store to the closed side. Haha, is that so? Which girl fell into the charm of R. James? Old Jack laughed and said with a mocking tone. A nice girl. Jennifer's beautiful golden hair flashed in his mind, and Li Ran calmly accepted old Jack's ridicule. Really? Then I wish you a good date, James. Thanks. Li Ran nodded slightly and accepted the blessing from old Jack. It's nice to be young. In the laundromat, old Jack watched Li Ran leave, muttered something in a low voice, and then put his eyes back on the newspaper in his hand. However, the full-page entertainment section on the other side of the newspaper in old Jack's hands is reporting on the Grand Victoria's Secret party held last night by the famous playboy Tony Stark in New York City. James, thank you. Taking Li Ran's hand out of the cinema. Jennifer leaned on his shoulder with a look of joy. Hey Jennifer, you don't need to say thank you to me. Shaking his head, Li Ran stretched out his hand across the girl's smooth blonde hair and replied in a gentle tone, "It was my honor to be able to spend a wonderful night with such a beautiful girl in front of me." James. Although Li Ran's lines were old-fashioned, it still deeply moved the girl Jennifer. She looked at the man in front of her, her eyes blurred. Rumbling. However, at this moment, there was a huge explosion and screams. It just turned the original warm scene into a disaster movie. What happened? Protecting Jennifer in his arms, Li Ran looked at the panicked crowd around him with a puzzled expression. Are aliens attacking New York? No, Tony hasn't turned into Iron Man yet, Captain America is still frozen in Antarctica, and the time is totally wrong. However, it didn't make Li Ran puzzled for too long. With a loud bang, the high wall of the movie theater was directly smashed into a big hole, and then a huge dark green figure appeared in front of him. I said, it was Hulk. The huge size, green skin, and the iconic pants made Li Ran recognize the identity of the other party at a glance, a future member of the Avengers, the Hulk. Li Ran nodded suddenly, and then reacted immediately. Now is not the time to think about it. The Hulk in this period is far less talkative than the Avengers in the future. Because of the endless pursuit operations of the U.S. military, the anger in his heart is growing all the time. Fleeing under restraint, New York had long since been reduced to a wreckage in the Hulk's wrath. Lee Ran looked at the wall of the cinema where Hulk had knocked out a human-shaped passage in front of him, and then turned to look at the helicopter hovering above, which was basically certain. In the current situation, the U.S. military must have lured Banner over by some means, intending to arrest him. As a result, Hulk was released accidentally, and the scene in front of him appeared. Sometimes, Lee Ran really couldn't understand some of the thinking patterns of the American military. He clearly knew the power of the Hulk, and ordinary conventional weapons couldn't help him much, but he always took a tough attitude to arrest him instead of using more powerful weapons. Flexible approach and Banner contact. Compared with the uncontrollable Hulk, Banner is the most suitable person to talk to, not to mention that Banner himself has always had the idea of wanting to control or even completely eliminate the Hulk. At this time, if the military can be softer and show goodwill, in fact, it can cooperate with Banner and even study. However, the military or the principal, General Ross, chose a confrontational line as a tough one. A good scene of win-win cooperation has just been made by the military into such an out-of-control result. The domineering and unreasonableness of the American military is evident. Chapter 11. Have you determined the Hulk's location? On the helicopter, General Ross frowned, looking at the panicked crowd below the appearance of the green monster, turned his head and asked his subordinates. Based on the condition of the damaged road and the evacuation signs of the crowd, it can be determined that the target is running in the direction of the Empire State Building. Stop him, don't let him go any further, just shoot me a missile when necessary. But, General, there are ordinary people below. The subordinate's expression changed, and he couldn't help but say, "This is an order, soldier." Interrupting his subordinate's words without hesitation, General Ross said firmly, "Our first task is to capture Hulk. In order to accomplish this goal, the necessary sacrifice is to allow what's more, isn't it Hulk who caused all the tragedies in front of us?" As a hardliner in the army, General Ross devoted his life to building a super force similar to Captain America during World War II. The Hulk was also a powerful monster accidentally born for this reason, and is currently the closest to success in the hands of General Ross' case. Therefore, it is absolutely impossible for him to give up Chi. Driven by the anger in his heart, Hulk continued to move forward like an angry beast. Wherever it went, it was like the wreckage of a war that was scattered all over the ground. He smashed the car that was blocking the road in front of him into a piece of scrap iron, and Hulk stood up, beating his chest and roaring at the gunship that was constantly flying around him behind him. Although the transformed Hulk lost Dr. Banner's wisdom, but with his beast intuition, he could also feel that the iron blocks hovering above his head would pose a certain threat to him. Hulk doesn't like the feeling of being threatened. After the angry roar, Hulk slammed his hands on the ground and smashed potholes of different depths on the concrete floor. Immediately afterwards, with the force of his fingers, he actually grabbed a huge cement stone and threw it towards the helicopter that was still in the air. Attention, raise, avoid, raise, avoid. Facing the roaring rocks, the pilot avoided the past with his rich experience. In midair, the power of inertia was lost, and the stones began to fall rapidly. And the place where it fell was a place where many people gathered. "Get out of the way. Dangerous." With a loud shout from someone, the gathered crowd began to run around in panic, but there were still some citizens who were slower to move, or who couldn't react in time, and stood in place and had no time to escape. Seeing, a tragedy is about to be staged. Oh no. OMG. Many citizens subconsciously closed their eyes or covered their mouths, unable to bear to see the bloody scene in front of them. Who is so uncivilized to throw such a big stone down? However, the expected disaster did not happen. A figure rushed out of the crowd, directly relying on his thighs to change the direction of the falling stone and let it fly into the coffee shop next to him. While it's still a tragedy for the coffee shop owner, it's still far better than what could have happened. Who is this? Dude, you are so cool. It actually kicked such a large stone away with one kick. Is it the same superhero that appeared in Hell's Kitchen? The legendary Kung Fu. Famousness from New York citizens plus 0.4. Famousness from New York citizens plus 0.2. Famousness from New York citizens plus 0.5. Looking down at the content displayed on the system data panel, Lee Ran moved his right leg quietly, so as not to let people see the unnaturalness on his feet. Although the direction of the falling stone was successfully changed, it did not mean that Li Ran was unscathed. Although the Dolly King Kong leg was powerful, it was only a kung fu skill belonging to the D-level character card, not the invincible King Kong leg in the true sense. Standing in the crowd at present, Li Ran relieved the injury on his foot while lighting up as if brushing the legend from New York citizens. When he felt that the situation on his feet was almost the same, he stopped mentioning it, and then ran towards the direction where the stone flew, which is where Hulk was. The reason why Li Ran reappeared as Ah Xing in the eyes of New York citizens was not simply to save people, but in fact the Hulk was his main purpose. As a famous man in the world of American comics, Lu Fatti and a future member of the Avengers will definitely bring Li Ran an objective reputation. General, someone is going in the direction of Hulk. Inside the helicopter, a soldier noticed the situation and reported it loudly. Who is it? For a split second, General Ross thought of many possible personnel, including his least favorite SHIELD agent. However, the answer given by the soldier was not any existence that General Ross envisioned. Not sure, the other party is moving very fast, but judging from his clothes, he is just an ordinary person or a homeless person. Homeless, General Ross frowned. Naturally, he accidentally appeared at the scene at this time would be an ordinary homeless. Reaching for the military binoculars in the soldier's hands, General Ross looked down from the helicopter, and soon noticed the man wearing a red singlet and plainly dressed below. Although the man's dress is simple, the speed of movement is definitely not simple. Who is this? On the helicopter, General Ross also had a lot of guesses because of Li Ran who suddenly came out. Below, in front of the avenue in Manhattan, New York City, Li Ran has seen the Hulk who was constantly yelling and venting and destroying everything around him. Observing from such a quiet distance gave Li Ran a new definition of the Hulk's power at the moment. Obviously, it is not something that the current self can contend with. Although the strength of Vajra's legs can make Li Ran kick a car, or kick an adult strongman, it is absolutely impossible to rub the car like a plasticine like the Hulk in front of him. Subconsciously feeling distressed for the owner of the car, Li Ran carefully avoided the angry Hulk's sight in front of him and hid behind a building. Just kidding, although Li Ran ran over with the idea of making the Hulk famous, he was definitely not stupid and rushed to Hulk's fist to die. He has noticed the military's actions, and it is obvious that he wants to make a big move. Li Ran planned to wait until the Hulk and the military were almost fighting before taking action in troubled waters. Minimize immediate danger. Although Li Ran's idea was good, he ignored that General Ross on the helicopter could not be left by the Hulk with unstable factors like him. The first group of assault squads enter the field. General Ross ordered to the soldiers below, search for the previous intruders, and if necessary, allow direct shooting of the target. Following the order of General Ross, several fully equipped soldiers stepped into the scene and searched carefully. Because of the Hulk's destruction, the entire street was filled with countless debris, and the surrounding gravel invisibly brought a certain degree of difficulty to the assault team's search. Emil looked away from a piece of wreckage that looked like a car shell. The huge fingerprints left on the wreckage made this battle-hardened veteran feel a little scared. He clearly knew that what he had to face next was an opponent more terrifying than war. Within 200 meters ahead, a suspected target person appears. The sound from the helmet made Emil come back to his senses. He quickly restrained his emotions, looked in the direction of the target and soon saw the red figure hiding in the back of the building. The intuition from the warrior made Li Ran vaguely aware of the peeping of the assault team. He raised his head, followed his inner feeling, and happened to see a member of the assault team not far from him. Looking at the well-equipped appearance of the team, Li Ran's heart burst, but he still pretended to be innocent on the surface. If I say, everything is just a misunderstanding, I don't know. Shooting. Bang 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 bang. What the hell? In the face of several involuntary bullets in front of him, Li Ran's expression changed greatly, and he stepped down hard, leaving a shallow crack on the ground, and then he suddenly flew to the side. Li Ran rolled over and removed the strength from his body. Looking back, the position he was standing in had been beaten into a honeycomb by the soldiers of the assault team. If he hadn't reacted fast enough, these bullets would have hit him. Thinking of this possibility, Li Ran's expression was somewhat frightened, followed by raging anger. Obviously, from the attitude of the assault team, it can be seen that the military has no plans to keep alive. To understand this, Li Ran has no intention of holding back. It can be seen from the situation in front of him that if he keeps his hand, the next person to be pierced by the bullet is likely to be Li Ran himself. Pay attention to evasion. The target was not hit. Emil hid behind a car in accordance with the tactical instructions, while changing the magazines, but always involuntarily thought of Li Ran's previous performance in his mind. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he couldn't believe that humans were fast enough to avoid bullets. Boom. In the distance, Hulk was still venting his anger. In the wreckage of the street only separated by the first floor, an obviously unequal battle is also continuing. From the brief contact before, it can be seen that the members of the assault team are all well-trained soldiers with extremely high tactical literacy. In a head-to-head battle, Li Ran might not be able to defeat them. Simply, the battle in front of him is not just a simple encounter, and Li Ran in the battle is not just an ordinary person who has no ability to fight back. Since you can't hide out one by one, then I can only do my best to help you out. From the previous situation, it is very likely that the target has a certain degree of ultra-high responsiveness, so wait. Boom. With the radio function of the tactical helmet, the members of the assault team still maintained smooth communication. Emil made tactical arrangements over the radio. Immediately afterwards, there was a loud bang. Emil's heart tightened, and he suddenly felt uneasy, and hurriedly shouted to the radio in his helmet, "Everyone, report the number to me on the radio in order." The remaining soldiers also sensed something, and hurriedly shouted, 1, 2, 6, Emil, 7. Finally, when he reported his order, Emil's expression did not improve, but became more gloomy. There are a total of 8 members of the assault team, and now there are only 7 people reporting the number, which means that there is a problem with one member. Who is the member who didn't count? It's GG, I didn't hear his voice. What happened? I don't know, I just heard a loud bang, and then boom. On the radio, the voices of the members of the assault team hadn't fallen. Another loud bang sounded. Edward, quote. On the other end of the radio, Emil's expression was gloomy. As an experienced combat veteran, he had already noticed that what happened to the members of the assault team was obviously related to the man they shot and attacked earlier. However, Emil was still a little confused about what means the opponent used to defeat the members of the team one by one. In any case, the other party cannot continue like this. With a decision in his heart, Emil immediately ordered the remaining members of the assault team through the radio, "Everyone, get ready for a frontal assault, 1, 2, 3, go." Under Amir's order, the soldiers who had been hiding nearby quickly got up with their guns. And it was also at this moment that Emil finally saw the opponent's means of attack. For a moment, even this veteran with extensive war experience couldn't help but feel a little bit of surprise. Famousness from assault squad members plus 0.4. Fame from Amir plus 3.0. Famousness from assault squad members plus 0.4. Eat me, fat boy happy water. Li Ran was sure that he succeeded in pulling out the hidden members of the assault team, but his foot movements were not slow at all, and he directly kicked the can of Coke in front of him with a heavy blow. Boom. With a familiar loud noise, cola flew directly in the direction of a member of the assault team in the distance. That's right, the attack method Li Ran used to destroy the members of the assault team was nothing else than the cans of happy water commonly known as Fat Boy, which is the so-called Coke in front of him. Don't look at the appearance of this can of Coke is not amazing, but with the strong foot strength of Li Ran's strong diamond feet, it is directly transformed into a simple cannonball. Hit the members of the assault team, and directly knocked them into the air with their equipment. The bulletproof armor on their bodies could not offset the powerful force from the Vajra legs. In midair, streaks of brown liquid sprayed everywhere. The scene was very chaotic. In the past, if someone told Emil that he was attacked by Coke, then he must take it as a joke, or simply a cliché situation in some third-rate comedy. However, when this scene appeared in front of his eyes, Emil realized that everything was not a comedy, but a real horror movie in a comedy shell. The first team replied, "Tell me the progress of the mission." Because of Hulk's indiscriminate attack, the helicopter could not get close, and General Ross could only inquire about the situation by radio. Quote. "Sir, we were attacked. The other party is not an ordinary person." On the other end of the radio, Emil responded intermittently. He was the only survivor of the assault team and had just avoided the attack of a can of Coke. What happened? General Ross frowned. The members of the assault team were all outstanding soldiers drawn by him, with rich experience in combat, but such heavy casualties occurred in such a short period of 10 minutes. "Soldier, tell me, what kind of attack did you suffer?" As a powerful faction in the American military today, General Ross has naturally come into contact with a lot of inside information, including some information about S.H.I.E.L.D. Quote. It's Coke, we were attacked by Coke. On the other end of the radio, after a brief silence, Emil answered with some difficulty. Cola. On the helicopter, General Ross's old-fashioned face was full of astonishment, and the soldiers beside him couldn't help but glance at each other. General Ross imagined many attacks that soldiers could encounter, including the appearance of supernatural attacks, but he did not expect that the attack on his soldiers would actually be Coke. Please, this is a formal military operation, not a Coke commercial, can you be serious? Tell me, the soldier, what exactly is Cola's specific attack method, is it something? After a moment of silence, General Ross suppressed the overwhelming sense of disobedience in his heart and asked. Not far away, there is a giant covered in green that is wreaking havoc, so it seems that it is not incomprehensible that the assault team was attacked by Coke. It has been observed that the target possesses superhuman powers, capable of putting. I was discovered. Boom. Quote. Soldier, please answer, soldier, answer right away. With a brief loud noise, the other end of the radio went silent. On the helicopter, General Ross kept shouting loudly on the walkie-talkie, but got no response. Ha. Emil fell into the rubble, panting weakly. His armor was shattered, a can of Coke was embedded in his chest, and the black liquid kept flowing down his chest. In a trance, Emil only heard a roar from Hulk and felt the violent vibration from behind him, and then he lost all consciousness. Did you make a mistake? Lee Ran didn't have time to breathe a sigh of relief after successfully using the Fatboy Happy Water to eliminate all the members of the assault team. I saw Hulk, who was venting not far away, roared, turned his head, and coincidentally met his gaze. After confirming his eyes, Lee Ran immediately became Hulk's next target. Involuntarily, he rushed in his direction. There was a wailing in his mouth, but Lee Ran also knew that Hulk in a state of anger did not have much reason at all, so naturally there was no possibility of communication. Seeing the green figure approaching, Lee Ran immediately picked up a can of Coke and kicked it in Hulk's direction. Boom. However, this Coke attack, which attached the powerful strength of Lee Ran's strong Vajra legs, was able to directly hit the assault team, but hit Hulk without causing any impact to it at all, but was directly thrown to the side. How to fight this? Seeing that his attack could not even break the Hulk's defense, Lee Ran immediately put out his plan to compete with Hulk. Sure enough, a monster of Hulk's level is not something Lee Ran can deal with at this stage. Quickly giving up the plan to meet Hulk head-on, Lee Ran turned around without hesitation and ran towards the denser high-rise buildings behind him. Although there is no way to stop Hulk's pace in the terrain with many high-rise buildings, it can at least slow down his speed. General, Hulk is moving again. On the helicopter, before General Ross could figure out the situation of his assault team, the soldiers on the side suddenly started to report. What direction is the Hulk moving in? General Ross asked immediately after putting down the walkie-talkie that didn't respond. The direction of Hulk's movement is where the assault team entered before. In other words, Hulk was running in the direction of the man before. General Ross reacted quickly and immediately ordered the remaining soldiers, all soldiers, stop Hulk from moving, don't let him move forward. Although it has not yet been clear about the purpose of the man's presence here, whether it is for selfishness or confidentiality, General Ross does not want the two sides to successfully contact. With the order of General Ross, the helicopter that had been hovering above the Hulk began to fall slowly, and a steady stream of bullets began to be fired. The attack from the gunship apparently helped Lee Ran, who escaped. Although the helicopter's bullets could not cause any damage to Hulk, but it blocked his progress very well. Angrily, he turned his head and glanced at the helicopter hovering overhead. With a roar, he bent down and grabbed a piece of the car door at his hand and threw it in the direction of the helicopter. Raise, evade, raise, evade. In the face of Hulk's attack, the pilot of the helicopter repeated the same technique to avoid it. The pilot looked at the car door that flew under the fuselage, and before he could breathe a sigh of relief, he immediately felt a strong shaking of the fuselage, and then saw Hulk's huge green palm appear on the helicopter's side, front of the fuselage. Hulk appeared on the plane. Really, empty hand jerking. Witnessing Hulk's bouncing down a helicopter hovering in midair, Lee Ran not only mourned 3 seconds of silence for the unlucky pilot, but also sped up his movements. Just kidding, in the current situation, even the military's armed helicopters can't stop the Hulk for a round. Ow! Throwing the wreckage of the helicopter behind him, Hulk raised his head and let out a deafening roar at the remaining helicopters in the air. He's provoking us. On the helicopter, General Ross stared blankly at Hulk's behavior. There is a saying that the person who knows you best is often your enemy. Years of pursuit operations have given General Ross a considerable in-depth understanding of Hulk's physical behavior and ability characteristics, and he can easily detect his intentions from Hulk's expression. Compared with the previous pursuit data in the desert, Hulk's strength and defense have been significantly improved this time, and he has also shown a jumping ability that has not been seen before. It is initially estimated that the initial jump height is about 20 meters. We need to continue to observe in the future. Hulk's ability is constantly evolving. Glancing at the data given by the soldiers, General Ross's face showed a rare look of anxiety. We must arrest him before he grows to be more difficult. Quote. Although there was a decision in his heart, but when he turned to look at Hulk's position, General Ross's expression was a little helpless. The location chosen by Lee Rand can certainly slow down the Hulk's movement speed, but the environment with many high-rise buildings also affects the flight operations of the helicopters, making it impossible for them to form a certain scale of offensive and cause effective damage to the Hulk. What about the ground troops? Why haven't they arrived at the scene yet? According to the information, the helicopter was raised to a position where the Hulk could not reach, and General Ross asked his subordinates while watching the Hulk below. In the process of advancing, the armored vehicle unit is changing its route due to road obstructions. It is expected to arrive at the target site in 3 minutes at night. 3 minutes, do you think Hulk will stay in place and wait for us quietly for 3 minutes? General Ross, turning to look at the soldier reporting the situation, asked coldly. The soldier looked down at the Hulk below and shook his head. Report, sir, no. Then tell me the soldiers of the armored force and come over immediately. Yes, sir. What happened again? It's a call from the army. Hearing the soldier's reminder, General Ross subconsciously frowned, stern face, and the mobile phone handed over by his subordinates. The American military has a complex command system, with both hawkish generals like General Ross and dove leaders who advocate negotiation. However, due to the frequent outbreak of superhuman incidents, the hardliners in the military, led by General Ross's faction, have the upper hand. I'm Ross. General Ross, do you know how much trouble and influence you and your green-skinned monster have brought to the military due to the conflict in Manhattan? Just now, Mr. President has called the military to ask. The so-called green-skinned monster in your mouth is called Hulk. On the helicopter, General Ross had to be distracted by the sudden call from the military. Below, the Hulk, who had shown great power, turned his attention to the little bug he was chasing before. And soon found the figure of the little bug. The little bug did not take advantage of his efforts to deal with the small toy on his head to escape, but stood there in a grand manner, as if waiting for him. Hey, Lee Rand took a deep breath when he noticed Hulk's gaze, then put his hands together in a trumpet-like shape around his mouth, and shouted, the big guy over there, I'm here, come here quickly. The scene in front of you, if the two protagonists are replaced by pleasing characters, it will definitely be a heartwarming scene. Unfortunately, the reality is, Lee Rand, who was shouting, was dressed in shabby clothes, while Hulk on the other side had nothing to do with pleasing the eyes. But to a certain extent, it is this great contrast that makes the scene in front of you even more eye-catching. The specific situation, I will go back and explain it myself. On the helicopter, General Ross noticed the situation underneath, and immediately hung up the phone in his hand without hesitation. Lee Rand's actions attracted Hulk's attention without any accident. Seeing this little bug who only dared to run around in the face of his pursuit, suddenly became bold and shouted at himself. Although Hulk's simple thinking couldn't immediately figure out the reason for the change, he still sensed the other party's intention and seemed to want to attract himself. Since he wanted to ask Hulk to go over, then Hulk went over and smashed him to pieces. Hulk, whose brain was flooded with anger, would never think about whether there were any traps behind Lee Rand's actions. Everything he thought about was destruction, destruction. With a loud roar, Hulk landed on the ground like a beast and charged towards Lee Rand with both hands and feet. Seeing that Hulk was successfully attracted, Lee Rand didn't dare to relax at all, and turned around quickly to reveal the conspicuous red fire hydrant behind him. After squatting down slightly, he lifted up his Vajra legs and kicked it down towards the top of the fire hydrant with all his strength. Clank! With a crisp sound like a metal collision, the original fire hydrant began to deform gradually under Li Ran's legs, and a small stream of water began to spray out along the cracks on the fire hydrant. In front of him, the fire hydrant was continuously deformed with the powerful strength of Li Ran's strong Vajra legs. However, the Hulk behind him also approached him at a speed visible to the naked eye. Hurry up, hurry up. Feel the vibration that is getting closer and closer behind you, and the roar that seems to be close at hand. Li Ran could only feel his heart beating wildly, and he didn't know whether it was sweat on his face or the water from the fire hydrant soaking his eyes. Ah, ah! With a deafening roar, the running Hulk suddenly jumped up and flew towards Li Ran with a violent gust of wind. Bang! It was at this same instant that the fire hydrant that had been under Li Ran's attack was finally kicked apart, and a huge stream of water surging along the gap of the fire hydrant hit Hulk. The water flow sprayed from the fire hydrant is naturally unlikely to cause too much damage to the Hulk. After all, no matter how strong the water flow is, it can't match the strength of a bullet under normal circumstances. However, with the huge amount of water sprayed in the fire hydrant, it stopped Hulk's next steps very well. At this time, the shortcomings of Hulk's lack of IQ were exposed. He clearly ran towards Li Ran, but was interrupted by the water in the fire hydrant in front of him. He immediately left Li Ran aside and rushed towards the fire hydrant. Looking at the Hulk who is constantly advancing against the current with a tendon in front of him, Li Ran made a decisive decision, and with the strength of his powerful King Kong legs, he kicked the Hulk. Boom! Hulk, who was facing the water, was not aware of it for a while, and was kicked by Li Ran's 10% powerful Dolly King Kong legs. With a bang, the huge body suddenly flew out and crashed into the wall of the opposite tall building. So hard, although Li Ran accomplished the feat of kicking the flying Hulk, he was not completely harmless. He staggered to his feet and felt the sharp pain spreading from his toes. He didn't have to look down to know that his right foot was definitely swollen. Compared with the previous cement stones, Hulk's body is undoubtedly stronger. After all, this is a defense that can hit just a bullet in the front. Famous from Hulk plus 55. Famous from Banner plus 70. Famousness from General Ross plus 45. Famousness from Soldiers plus 0.5. Although the process was a little more difficult, the reward was undoubtedly quite gratifying, especially for Hulk, who was worthy of being one of the important members of the future Avengers. Attacking someone who could actually gain double the fame, this kind of feeling was like it's a surprise to win the lottery suddenly. As for the other General Ross, although the name is a bit unfamiliar, it should be the one who has been chasing Hulk all the time. Although, psychologically, Li Ran can't wait to brush his 1.8 million reputation on Hulk, and then directly open a golden treasure box that roams the beautiful world in seconds. However, the reality is that a tricky attack on Hulk is already extremely difficult, not to mention that General Ross is staring at him in the distance. Therefore, after briefly weighing the pros and cons, Li Ran chose to retreat quite conscientiously. On the helicopter, General Ross silently watched Li Ran evacuating from the scene. Because of the superhuman jumping ability that Hulk suddenly showed earlier, some of them did not dare to land easily from the air. They could only use their eyes to keep Li Ran's back behind him. Prison will be imprinted in the heart. A few minutes later, armored troops arrived on the scene. Carefully entered the building that Hulk crashed into, but only found a piece of gravel, but the Hulk who was the target has disappeared without a trace. After getting off the helicopter, General Ross looked at the wreckage of the empty building and gave an order with a blank face. Search the nearby streets with all your strength. He must have changed back to Banner. In New York City, it is easy to find a green giant, but it is undoubtedly quite difficult to find Banner who has become an ordinary person again. In particular, after several chases, Dr. Banner obviously has a fairly mature method of evading the military's tracking. In the stinking alley, a ragged homeless man was curled up in the corner, staring at the pedestrians in the street with a numb expression. His expression was numb, as if another down-and-out homeless man on the streets of New York was beaten down by reality, but deep down he was always vigilant about the situation around him. Watching several men with neat and orderly steps, with obvious military characteristics, walk away from the street, Banner breathed a sigh of relief, ignoring the stench around him, leaning on the wall and quietly recalling all the previous encounters. After transforming into Hulk, his memory has always been very vague, and the information about the outside world has always been intermittent and unable to form. And the last memory recovered this time is only a vague memory of Hulk as if he was kicked away. Who is it that has the power to kick the Hulk? Hum. In the hospital ward, Emil woke up from a coma. You're awake, soldier. A familiar voice came from his ear. Emil subconsciously wanted to turn his head to look, but found that he could not move his body easily, even the simplest turning of his head could not be done. Don't try again, soldier. General Ross stepped forward and came to Emil's eyes, looking at the veteran who was lying on the hospital bed with bandages wrapped around his hands. You have been seriously injured, and more than half of your body is covered. The bones have been injured by comminuted fractures and are temporarily paralyzed. Even if these injuries can be cured in the future, they are destined to live on crutches for the rest of their lives. Stand up. So, I can't go back to the battlefield to fight, sir. The cruel reality completely destroyed Emil, the veteran's will to survive. He opened his eyes wide, but he couldn't stop the tears from leaving the corners of his eyes. He asked hoarsely with his only movable mouth. In theory, that should be the case. In theory. The strong will to survive made Emil instantly aware of the meaning of General Ross's words. He opened his eyes in the hospital bed and his breathing suddenly became rapid, and urgently asked, Sir, what do you mean? There is a possibility of being rescued. General Ross was condescending and looked at Emil's expression on the hospital bed. After years of research by the military, although the effect of using the super soldier serum was still not as perfect as in the original Captain America, he also speculated that it would make method to maximize its effect. Strong emotions that drive the strengthening effect of the serum. Although, it cannot be guaranteed 100%, but it is at least an option. Have you made up your mind? I'm like this, do I still have a chance to choose? Emil rolled his eyes and glanced at the bandage on his body, and replied with a wry smile. If he knew that he would survive like this in the end, he would rather have died on the battlefield in the first place. Seeing this, General Ross nodded, then took out a small box from his pocket, took out a syringe with dark blue turbid liquid, and injected it into Emil's body. What? Famousness from Banner +60. Fame from Amir +40. What's the situation? At home, Li Ran looked at the legend that suddenly appeared in front of him, and suddenly showed a blinded expression. He didn't do anything at all, so why did he suddenly have a legend? Moreover, even if he stepped back 10,000 steps, he could still understand a little bit about Banner's legend. Emil, that one again. Frowning, Li Ran thought hard for a while, and finally decided to give up. No matter what he does so much, it's a good thing to have a reputation. Li Ran raised his head and glanced at the 560-point reputation displayed on the data panel, feeling more and more that his decision was correct. It's only been a long time, and I've saved up to half of the legendary redemption for Black Iron treasure chest. Sure enough, high risk means high reward. Although, there are some thoughts in his heart that make Li Ran want to run to Tony Stark immediately to brush a wave of fame. However, contacting the reality, Li Ran quickly calmed down. At this stage, although Tony Stark has not yet transformed into Iron Man who saves the world, his identities as the chairman of Stark Industries and the most well-known playboy in New York still attract attention to his every move. Not to mention, his father Howard Stark is one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. If there were no S.H.I.E.L.D. agents around Tony Stark, Li Ran wouldn't believe it even if he was killed. Even Li Ran boldly speculated that if Tony Stark hadn't killed himself and went to Afghanistan to test his latest weapon achievements, perhaps Obadiah Stane would never have found the opportunity to suffer from all kinds of future weapons. The predicament, of course, is that there may never be an Iron Man. Having said so much, did Li Ran really give up looking for Tony Stark? Of course not. With the previous examples of Daredevil and this Hulk incident, Li Ran has clearly recognized the gap in the popularity that can be brought about between American characters and ordinary people. This kind of gap may not be obvious in the current 1,000-point legendary Black Iron treasure chest, but in the future, when it comes to bronze, silver and even gold treasure chests, and thinking about the 0.3 approximately 0.5 little bit of legend from New York citizens, it is obvious. It's a pretty unrealistic thing. What's more, the appearance of Hulk this time also gave Li Ran a subconscious sense of urgency. The appearance of the Hulk also reminds Li Ran to a certain extent that the time is not far from the first New York War of the Avengers. That level of battle is not something he can handle with the 2D rank cards in his hand. It seems that the steps should be accelerated. James, where are you? It's nothing, I'll come out for a drink. Li Ran turned his head, looked at the beautiful golden color in the bedroom, and then replied with a smile. The next day, most of the New York media published follow-up reports on the latest events in Manhattan. Under the influence of the obvious military intervention, the original Hulk's havoc in Manhattan turned into an ordinary natural gas pipeline explosion. Afterwards, although there were also a small number of media, such as the Daily Clarion, chasing the truth, it was obvious that nothing could be done. I swear, I really saw the green monster appear in the cinema, and I deliberately left the movie ticket of which day as evidence. A Chinese man, he kicked such a big stone away with one kick. You can't imagine how cool the situation was at that time, so I went to Chinatown to learn from a kung fu master. Kung fu, even though he's Korean, teaches karate classes. The ripples of the Hulk incident, apart from bringing a little bit of legend to Iran, it seems that there is no more discussion. Even a few days later, forgetful New Yorkers will forget what happened in Manhattan and return to this original life. Hogan, remember to wash my car for me. I have an important appointment waiting for me tonight. Throwing the key into the driver Happy's hand, Tony walked into the Stark Industries building with a cynical smile on his face. You're late, Tony. Looking down at the time on his hand again, Pepper said to Tony. Everyone is already waiting for you in the conference room. Hey, take it easy, Pepper, you're a little too nervous, and it's not a very important meeting. In fact, even if I don't come, you can complete this meeting for me today. Tony's trusted words made Pepper subconsciously smile. But then he restrained himself. No, you are Tony Stark, and the shareholders of today's meeting came here specially for you. In this case, there is no need to worry. After all, superstars are always the last to appear. Tony, okay, I admit it. Seeing that the expression on Pepper's face changed a bit, Tony then restrained his hippie smile and replied solemnly, I overslept. But I have already told Jarvis the time of the meeting. I know, so I deliberately asked Jarvis to call me an hour later. After all, you know I sleep late. I think it's late for a date. Wow, Pepper, you still know me. Seeing Pepper's face getting more and more ugly, Tony changed the subject. Tell me, what is the meeting today? It's about the changes in the company's stock price during this period. Recently, the stock price of Hammer Industries has shown an upward trend. It is said that one of their latest products has been selected by the military and will become a common equipment for a special unit. Therefore, shareholders have some. I'm worried that Stark Industries' stock price will be affected by this. Just because of this, shareholders need some confidence, Tony. All right. Facing Pepper's request, Tony immediately shrugged and nodded in response. After the two looked at each other and smiled, Tony straightened his expression and pushed open the door of the conference room. Walking into the conference room, the first thing Tony saw was Obadiah's face. He nodded subconsciously, and then turned to look at the shareholders in the conference room, and said in a relaxed tone. Sorry, there is a traffic jam on the road. Mr. Stark, what do you want to explain to us that Stark Industries has not launched new products for a while? Some of our shareholders agree that your recent performance is too ostentatious. There's reason to suspect that you haven't given any thought to the company's products over this period of time. Nothing to say, Mr. Lister. In fact, if you and your friends think there is something wrong with Stark Industries, you can sell your stock. I personally have no opinion at all. Tony's tough answer not only made the shareholder who asked the question look ugly, but Pepper, who was standing behind him, also changed slightly. Tony. In the end, it was Obadiah, who was a shareholder and his father's former friend, that made Tony restrain his behavior. Glancing at everyone in the conference room, Tony immediately said, I know that the company's shareholders have had some opinions on my recent performance. I'm here today to give some advice to some people. Wake up. The reason why Stark Industries has developed to its current position is not the stocks you talk about, or other bara things. It's this. Tony pointed to his head and looked around. In addition, I already have a general idea about the company's latest product. I think it won't take too long, you will see it. The shareholders' meeting, because of Tony Stark's tough attitude, ended abruptly. How am I doing? On the way to the office, Tony turned his head indifferently and asked Pepper, who was beside him. You're going too far, Tony. Pepper said bluntly. Mr. List is only out of concern. He just cares about his pockets. Tony interrupted Pepper's correction, and curled his lips with a disdainful expression. In fact, Stark Industries has earned them a lifetime of money over the past few years, but I never felt content, but became more and more greedy. Sometimes I wonder, don't they have other hobbies besides making money, such as going out to go fishing or something? Pepper. Tony is right. At this time, Obadiah on the side immediately echoed, it's just a few unimportant minority shareholders and they can't make a difference. With the help, Tony naturally became more and more complacent, turned his head to Pepper and shrugged, with an expression of, I'm right, and stepped into the elevator. Mr. Obadiah, it is because you have been so protective of him that he is so fearless. Seeing this, little Pepper complained to Obadiah helplessly. Well, it's all my fault. Obadiah smiled nonchalantly, waved his hand to Tony in the elevator and shouted, Hey, Tony, don't forget your promise on the board. Don't worry, don't forget. In the elevator, Tony pressed the button and replied confidently. Obadiah stood at the elevator door, looked at the elevator going up, restrained his smile, tidied up his collar, and then pressed the button on the other side of the elevator indifferently. So, what's the next itinerary? Tony asked as he walked out of the elevator. Pepper, MIT intends to invite you as a guest speaker for the new season of Commencement. Tony raised his eyebrows and said in surprise, didn't they already invite them last time? Pepper, I know, but you missed the appointment that time. Tony nodded suddenly. Oh, I remember, I happened to have some trouble that day. Pepper said with a blank expression, if you mean the two model girlfriends. Tony, actually, you can't say girlfriends. How do I know that they have misunderstood without authorization? Pepper took a deep breath and said, Tony, sometimes, I really think you're a complete asshole. I've never denied this. Tony spread his hands and walked into the office with a look of indifference. Walking into the office, Tony poured himself a glass of red wine first. Tony, wait for an important meeting. So I didn't prepare your cup. Ignoring Pepper's warning, Tony strolled to his desk while tasting the fine wine in his glass. Then, he saw the card on the table. Jarvis, has anyone come to my office? Tony put down the red wine glass in his hand and walked slowly to the card. No, sir. In midair, the voice of the intelligent housekeeper Jarvis sounded. What's wrong, Tony? Noticing the change in the atmosphere, Pepper immediately showed concern. It seems that someone secretly left a note for me. Tony picked up the card on the table and glanced at the contents, then raised his eyebrows and replied. After taking the card in Tony's hand, Pepper saw the content on it. Notice. On the Saturday night of the carnival, as the clock strikes 0, I will come to take the steel car. Phantom Thief Kid. Jarvis, bring up all Kaido Kid's messages for me. Quote. Okay, sir. With Tony's order, Jarvis immediately projected a virtual screen in the office, which listed all the information about the Phantom Thief Kid, news reports, and even relevant investigation materials within the police department. I think we should call the police, Tony. Pepper couldn't help worrying looking at everything displayed on the screen. Jarvis, help me get in touch with New York. Wait a minute, Tony said, interrupting Pepper's next move. His eyes flashed constantly on the virtual screen in front of him, looking at the man in a white suit and cape and a top hat in the news report, his eyes flashed with strong curiosity. Pepper, don't you think, this is a very interesting thing? Tony waved his finger, hiding the information on the virtual screen, leaving only the news about the April Fool's Day report, a man active in New York thief, send me a notice. This is not an interesting thing, Tony. Pepper said with a serious face, you have become the target of a criminal, this is a very dangerous thing. However, judging from the past cases of the Phantom Thief, he is not too dangerous. He just used magic to steal items. I can't put you at risk, Tony, your safety is very important to Tucker Industries. Just Tucker Industries, and I. Okay, Tony shrugged, as if persuaded by Pepper's words. By the way, what day is it today? Saturday. Pepper subconsciously blurted out a reply, and then reacted, looking up at Tony in front of him. You won't listen to me, right? That's right. Tony nodded affirmatively. You really are an asshole. Thank you for the compliment. Saturday, on the occasion of Midnight Carnival. Tony sat in his car, silently looking at the notice letter left by the Phantom Thief Kid in his hand, a little fascinated. Tony, here we are. In the driver's seat, the driver and bodyguard Happy Hogan glanced at the situation in front of him, then turned his head to remind Tony who was sitting in the back seat. Oh. Hearing Happy's voice, Tony immediately came back to his senses. He put away the notice in his hand and watched the lively carnival scene outside the window, and a subconscious smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Although he is very concerned about the Phantom Thief, for Tony, who is still immersed in the identity of a playboy, everything in front of him is the goal of his enjoyment. Old rules, happy. I see. Tony left a casual sentence and was about to get out of the car, but then he seemed to suddenly think of something, stopped what he was doing, turned around and said to Happy in the car, Happy, this time, give me the key. To keep it. Okay. Although it was a little strange why Tony suddenly changed his mind, the driver Happy nodded in agreement without thinking much. You are the boss, you have the final say. Tony, what are you looking at? I'm waiting. Tony turned his head and focused his eyes on the woman in front of him again. I'm sorry, can you say your name again? You weren't listening to me at all, were you, Tony Stark? Perhaps, it's because someone is too attractive that I can't concentrate. Tony raised his eyebrows and said eloquently. Or maybe someone didn't listen carefully from beginning to end at all. Both of these explanations are acceptable, but I personally prefer the former one. Facing Tony's frivolous reaction, the woman shook her head helplessly, and then reintroduced herself. My name is Maya Hansen, and I am currently conducting research on biological programming. Wow, biological programming. You already did this reaction just now, Tony. Well, maybe I really didn't listen just now. Tony shrugged and glanced down at the time on his watch subconsciously. You seem to be very concerned about time. Maya asked when she noticed Tony's absent-mindedness. Listen, Maya, if possible, I'd be more than happy to discuss your biological programming research with you and learn about your research progress and results, but there's another very important thing waiting for me to face. Tony touched the notice of Kato Kid in his pocket. With a hesitant look on his face, he looked at the moving Maya in front of him and recalled the content of the notice. Finally, with a wave of his hand, he made a decision. Well, it's actually not too important. Compared with these, I actually care more about your biological programming research. I wonder if I have the honor to go to your room to study it in depth. Rather than waiting for the so-called Phantom Thief Kid, the Maya in front of her was more attractive to the playboy Tony. You can see my research, but that's all. Certainly. Tony raised his eyebrows and agreed casually. He glanced at the party venue in front of him, and soon found his driver, Happy, in the crowd. Hey, Happy, it's time for us to go back and get my car. Understood, sir. Taking the key that Tony threw, Happy glanced back and forth between Tony and Maya, and then showed an understanding expression. Gentlemen, hearing Happy's strange name suddenly calling himself Mr., Tony's face couldn't help showing a little puzzled expression. However, before Tony could think too much, the voice from behind brought his thoughts back. Mr. Tony Stark, Mr. Tony Stark. Tony turned his head and saw a man with long hair and a cane walking towards him. My name is Killian, and I'm your #1 fan. Oh, hello Killian. Tony looked at Killian in front of him and shook hands with him. You don't look like you're coming to a party in this outfit. I came here on purpose for you, Mr. Tony. Come for me. If the person who said this was a charming beauty, Tony would naturally accept it very happily, but looking at Killian's sloppy appearance in front of him, he didn't feel much happiness. I come from a private think tank, called Advanced Intelligent Machines, or AIM for short, which specializes in research on the latest cutting-edge technologies that have emerged. Killian took out 2 business cards from his pocket and moved towards Tony, and Maya on the opposite side handed it over. Just give her both, no need to give it to me. For guys like Killian, who come to cooperate with him in the name of a private think tank, Tony will encounter a lot within a period of time. So I didn't pay much attention to Killian's introduction at all. He looked down at the time, and then said, Okay, Killian, it's a pleasure to talk to you, but there are more important things for me to do next. Really? Well, I understand. Tony's refusal was quite obvious, and Killian's excited expression immediately dimmed. Tony took Maya's hand and took a few steps out, and then he seemed to think of something again. He turned his head and looked at Killian, who was still standing in a sloppy dress. Sorry, just wait for me. Apologizing to Maya beside him, Tony turned around and walked to Killian's present. You know what, Killian said excitedly when he looked at Tony, who was back in front of him again. Yes, Killian, I thought again and thought that there is actually a possibility of full cooperation between us, otherwise I will go and send Maya first, and in 5 minutes, we will meet on the roof. You know me, do you mean? I know, no problem, Mr. Stark, I'll go right away. Aren't you interested in private think tanks? Looking back at the business card in her hand, Maya looked at Killian, who was leaving with excitement, and turned to Tony, who came back and asked. I really don't have any interest in think tanks. Then why? I'm just very interested in Killian as a man. Huh. Hearing Tony's words, Maya subconsciously took a step aside, not expecting that Tony Stark, a playboy who is well known throughout New York, would actually be. It's not that kind of interest. As soon as Tony saw Maya's expression, he knew that she had misunderstood, and quickly explained, I just think that Killian's appearance is too coincidental, and it just happened to me. It's a very interesting thing, so I'm going to do a little experiment. Then what if you were wrong? Then I can only say sorry to Mr. Killian. Tony shrugged, but he didn't take his previous matters to heart at all. He pulled Maya out of the party. But he didn't see his car waiting for him at the door. Sorry, please allow me a little more time. Tony is naturally a little embarrassed that such a mistake happened at such an important moment. Speaking to Maya, who was beside him, Tony turned his head and soon found the driver Happy Hogan not far away. Happy. Oh, Tony, why did you come out so early? In the distance, the driver Happy was eating a hamburger with his head down. When he heard Tony's voice, he turned his head quickly, met Tony's gaze, and hurriedly explained, I felt a little hungry, so I went to the neighborhood and bought a hamburger to eat. I didn't say that. What about the car? What car? Happy looked blank. My car. Didn't I just hand you the keys? Tony looked at Happy's blank expression in front of him, and suddenly became a little uneasy in his heart. The key. Hasn't the key been in your hands since just now? Famousness from Tony Stark +85. Famousness from Happy Hogan +25. Famousness from Maya Hansen +15. Lee Ran was driving the car on the streets of New York, and when he saw the legend displayed on the system data panel, he couldn't help but sigh. Tony is worthy of being a big dog. Just a simple face-to-face can bring him so much fame. While thinking about it, Lee Ran skillfully drove the vehicle in his hand and shuttled back and forth through the streets of New York. He was waiting for a response from Tony's side. On the other hand, just after realizing what happened to him from Happy's reaction, Tony's expression was obviously not very good. However, he was not completely unprepared. From his pocket, he took out his mobile phone, and Tony immediately shouted, Jarvis. Yes, sir. Show the location of the vehicle, and help me connect to the communication equipment in the car by the way. Understood, sir. Something refreshing happens to me every time. With the indifferent teasing of the smart housekeeper, the screen of the mobile phone in Tony's hand immediately turned into a route map of the New York City area, and also marked the location of the car as a red dot. Here, it's near the 3rd Street, not far from us. On the side, Happy glanced at the map on the screen with his head, and immediately recognized the other party's location. It seems that our Mr. Phantom Thief is very bold. Tony, what's going on? Maya asked involuntarily, looking at the scene in front of her. The development of the whole incident was completely different from what she had imagined before. The specific reason is too troublesome to explain in detail. In short, there is a mysterious figure who stole my car in front of me. Steal your car. The car of Tony Stark, chairman of the dignified Stark Industries, was actually stolen. This kind of reason sounds a bit exaggerated in Maya's ears. Of course, it is even more strange that Tony's own reaction. Excited look. Since the car was stolen, why not call the police? If Tony Stark called the police that his car was stolen, Maya believed that the entire New York City Police Department would act to help find it. It's just a means of transportation. It's not worth the trouble of calling the police. Besides, I'm very interested in the one who stole the car, and I hope to have a chat with him. Invisibly, Tony the dog made a speech, causing a critical blow in the opposite Maya's heart. Sir, I have connected the communication equipment in the car. At this time, Jarvis, who had been working, spoke again. Immediately afterwards, a melodious sound of music came from the phone. Hey, can you hear me? Coming. Hearing the sudden sound from the stereo, Lee Ran's eyes flashed with a gleam of light, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly, then he reached out and lowered the music in the car. Hello, Tony. You too, Mr. Thief. I admit, that little trick you used successfully fooled me, until 7 points. No, 10 minutes ago, I still had doubts, thinking that you could not fool me with the key. However, next, is the trouble now located? Well, Happy here and there. 3rd Avenue, Seaford Road. Mr. Thief driving in the direction of Wongnan on Seafordham Road, drive the car back to me again. After all, there is a very important appointment waiting for me. Hey Tony, I didn't promise to date you. Quote, look, my girlfriends are starting to get angry. If it was another person, and heard Tony's moderate warning in the car, especially knowing that his location was already known to him, it might start to become open. However, Lee Ran didn't seem particularly worried about this. While the car he was driving made a 180-degree turn, he still replied calmly to Tony, to be honest, Tony, I was a little disappointed with your previous reaction, but I didn't notice a little bit. Question. However, on the premise that you are so troublesome to find my position, I can give you another chance, as long as you can catch me. I want to declare, Mr. Thief, I didn't spend much to find you. Hearing the arrogant voice of the phantom thief on the other side of the phone, Tony couldn't help frowning and correcting. Sir, the communication has been cut off from the other side. Jarvis reminded. Thank you. Even though he was the dominant party, Tony felt inexplicably being compared, especially the fearless reaction of the monster thief on the other side, which made Tony feel a little embarrassed. You're welcome, sir, Jarvis replied indifferently, and then added, also, sir, I have to remind you that the current position of the vehicle is constantly approaching you. What? Jarvis' reminder made Tony react instantly. He lowered his head and saw the red dot on the screen in his hand that had already shown overlapping with his group. Then, there was a huge roar. Then I saw a familiar black car flashing quickly in front of my eyes. Okay, now I'm really annoyed. Faced with Lee Ran's obvious provocation, Tony couldn't stand it. He restrained the smile on his face, turned his head and said to Happy, Happy, find me a car right now. But, sir, your car is. I don't want to hear any reasons right now, I just want results. Okay, seeing that Tony's attitude was so firm, Happy had to give up his plan to persuade him again. He turned around and started to find a car for him. While walking, Happy took out his mobile phone from his pocket and found out one of the numbers was dialed. Tony, calm down. Beside, Maya looked at Tony, whose expression was obviously different from before, and subconsciously persuaded, didn't you say it before, these are just two means of transportation. The situation is different now. Tony looked up at the direction where the car disappeared, and said in a light tone, I don't like this feeling of being underestimated. When faced with provocations, I always respond directly to my face, absolutely not. We'll wait until the next day. Famousness from Tony Stark +65. In the car, Lee Ran looked at the data that appeared on the panel again, and his face couldn't help showing a bit of understanding. Tony in this period was arrogant, completely self-centered, and at the same time, he was the most unbearable to be provoked by others. Therefore, I followed this line of thought to make an appropriate provocation, and it really succeeded in stimulating Tony's emotions. As the saying goes, if there are no 2 or 3, how dare you go to Langshan? The reason why Lee Ran was so unscrupulous and even provocative towards Tony's performance was of course relying on him. E-class card, baby. Skills, tinnitus, stunt racing. Background introduction. When Baby was young, his parents died in a car accident, and he himself suffered from tinnitus, and he had to rely on the exclusive music in the headphones to control the rhythm of driving. Just above the steering wheel, he started driving for the old Atlanta gangster, paying off his debts with his work. As I said before, even cards of the same level are strong and weak. Although the E-level character cards drawn from the wooden treasure chest are generally just ordinary characters, they cannot be found in Lee Ran's current position. Circumstances don't help much. However, under the big waves, there will always be a few relatively useful cards. For example, although the character card Baby in Lee Ran's hand is still in the category of E-level cards, the skill of stunt racing is exactly what Lee Ran needs at present. Under some specific circumstances, the existence of some E-level cards with special skills may be more useful than D-level cards and can play a better role. Of course, the above cases are just a few of the exceptions. In fact, most of the E-rank cards in Lee Ran's hands, such as the character cards like Nohara Hiroshi, have no other use at all other than letting him complain. Lee Ran drove Tony's car through a certain intersection on 2nd Avenue. Deliberately slowed down and waited in place for a few minutes. Then, there was a huge roar. Lee Ran saw through the rear-view mirror that an eye-catching red sports car behind the car was speeding towards him at a speed of more than 100 per second. Needless to say, just based on the menacing appearance of this sports car, Lee Ran can determine that the person driving in the car is definitely the future Iron Man, Tony Stark. Obviously, Tony was annoyed by Lee Ran's previous series of operations. Driving a red sports car and stopped beside Lee Ran, Tony lowered the window, revealing his iconic mustache face, looking at the blurred figure in the driver's seat beside him, and mockingly said, "It's a coincidence, this is not ours." "Mr. Thief, why did you stop here suddenly? Do you need to wait for me to give you the money for the gas? Or, you can also use a magical trick to change the money in my pocket like before." "I stopped just to wait for you, Tony, lest I lose someone's excuse to cheat, it's not fair." The voice from the car window was a little distorted, but the content of the words still made Tony uncomfortable. "Ha," he raised his eyebrows and interrupted Lee Ran's next words. "Sorry, Mr. Thief, can you repeat what you just said?" "I, Tony Stark, would be rude. Quote. I'm just stating a possibility." Ignoring Tony's chattering questioning, Lee Ran stepped on the accelerator under his feet. With a roar of the motor, the next moment he rushed out like an arrow from the string. "Besides, red looks good on you, Tony." At the crossroads, Tony only vaguely heard the other side leave such a sentence. "Actually, I still match the color very well," he replied subconsciously. Tony turned his head to look at the rapidly disappearing figure of the car, then lowered his head and shouted to the mobile phone, "Jarvis, show the position of the car immediately and the shortest distance that can intercept the opponent." "Yes, sir." Following Tony's order, Jarvis quickly marked out the information of the surrounding roads and the route, and at the end he did not forget to add, "But sir, your actions violated the previous fair remarks." "I know." Driving the sports car and changing directions according to the route given by Jarvis, facing the bickering of the smart housekeeper, Tony immediately replied, "But from the beginning, my goal was not this, only to catch the thief who stole the car, is my real purpose." Quote. "But I still think, sir, it's just your excuse." Jarvis. "Yes, sir, you know too much. But it's all your programming, sir." With the stunt racing skills from baby Lee Ran freely shuttled through the traffic in New York. At this moment, Lee Ran felt that the surrounding vehicles seemed to be no longer an obstacle for him to move forward, but instead became a kind of help for him, allowing him to better intersperse and hide them. If there is only one fly in the ointment, it is the constant low-pitched sound in the ears. According to the introduction of the system, this seems to be a passive skill that comes with the character of Baby, and it is also the second character card with side effect skills that Lee Ran has come into contact with since Nohara Hiroshi. Simply, according to the introduction, Lee Ran had already prepared a way to deal with this side effect. Putting on the headphones, the impassioned music sounded in his ears. The next moment, Lee Ran felt like a car god possessed, as if every turn of the steering wheel in his hand and the accelerator pedal had a rhythm. Emotions, this is the complete body of the baby character. While Lee Ran thoughtfully drove the car through the opposite traffic, he did not forget to observe the surrounding situation. Although, from the beginning, he hadn't found the shadow of Tony in the angry red sports car he was driving, but Lee Ran didn't think Iron Man was a person who gave up so easily. Sure enough, the next moment, just as Lee Ran was driving the vehicle through a traffic light intersection, he saw a red sports car appearing in front of him. "Caught you, Mr. Thief." In the sports car, Tony looked at the familiar car opposite and said in a low voice. "That's not necessarily true." Lee Ran raised his head, looked at Tony's confident appearance in the sports car, and couldn't help but answer in a low voice. Immediately afterwards, he saw that he slammed on the brakes, shifted gears quickly, and turned the steering wheel. The narrow space in the driver's seat did not affect Lee Ran in the slightest. A set of smooth operations suddenly changed the direction of the vehicle that was originally driving in Tony's direction. With a sophisticated turn and drift, in front of Tony, Shishirin drove into another entrance next to it. Famousness from Tony Stark +70. "Sir, it seems that your plan has failed, and the other party's driving skills are far superior to yours." "You don't need to tell me, I saw it too." After a brief shock, Tony came back to his senses. He hurriedly drove his sports car towards the next intersection. Although Lee Ran's driving skills were far beyond his imagination, with Jarvis' advantage, he didn't think he would fail so easily. After all, the night is still growing, Mr. Thief. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe for more videos.